Oh. Well, good morning, everyone. This is Christine Robinson, Mayor of West Grey, and welcome to the April 13th, 2020 West Grey special meeting of the Committee of the Whole for Budget. We are using audio only to conduct this electronic meeting. Video is not possible at this time due to limited bandwidth in some areas of West Grey. Bandwidth is challenging our ability to do a complete video broadcast, so for now, we will be sharing today's agenda in addition to the audio. Item 1, I'm calling the meeting to order. I see that all members of council are present, as indicated through their login. Supervisor Hewlett, could you just indicate that is correct? Thank you. We have a quorum. This agenda has been posted and circulated. The meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the West Grey website, www.westgrey.com, courtesy of Whiteman Telecom. The technology for this meeting is being managed by staff. Please refrain from clicking buttons throughout the meeting unless prompted. Before we continue, I'd ask our Recreation Supervisor, Cody Hewlett, to give an overview of some of the other key points for this morning's meeting. Supervisor Hewlett, please.
Thank you. Members of council have been briefed on the various features of the Zoom meeting software. They will use their hands, the green check mark, to vote in favor of a motion or the red X button to vote against. Each mayor of council will be called upon verbally to confirm the vote. If you get disconnected from the software, you can dial in using number 647-374-4685 and meeting ID number 296-643-948.
Thank you, Supervisor Hewlett. We appreciate that information. Moving on to item 2, declarations of pecuniary interest, direct or indirect. Members of council, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? If so, please indicate by raising your hand. I'm not seeing any declarations at this point. Supervisor Hewlett, do you see any members indicating a declaration? Thank you very much. Seeing none, we move on to item 3, closed session. There is none for today's meeting. Item 4, matters arising from closed session. That is an NA. Here we are on item 5, items of business. 5A, presentation. This is a presentation from our Chief Administrative Officer, Laura Johnston. I would like to remind members of council at this time that if you do have a question following CAO Johnston's presentation, please raise your hand. As a reminder as well, the check mark and the X mark, check mark being in favor, X mark being opposed, are being used when we vote. Good morning, CAO Johnston. Please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, and good morning, Madam Mayor and members of council. I'd like to thank each of you and the members of the public who have asked to hit the pause button and look at the draft 2020 budget again. We know the world is a very different place than it was when we were intending to pass the 2020 budget on March 17th. In fact, that was the very day Premier Ford declared a province-wide state of emergency. West Grey is entering our 4th week of operating under our own emergency. Now more than ever, it is essential that we keep municipal operations functioning. We must also be ready to ramp up because community needs will change as we get through this pandemic. This is exactly what staff is doing. We are finalizing plans for a customer service support line. We are creating an inventory of resources from agencies and service clubs. We must be ready and responsive, so we are updating policies, streamlining processes, and our facilities will be ready if they need to be repurposed. We are also finalizing a volunteer management program in case we need to call on the community. Essential services like public works, finance, communications, and customer service continue. So while we are not all working together physically, West Grey staff is indeed all working together. It's impossible to predict how long this pandemic will last. We don't even know what things will look like week by week. However, we have to plan for our recovery state, and we've already started doing that. We want to make sure we are ready to unlock our doors, reopen our parks, and help kickstart our local economy. We are all worried about the economic impact of the COVID-19 crisis. I agree with leaders across the province who have said over and over, it is simply too soon to predict that impact. Yes, revenues will be lower, but we must remember, revenues are always an estimate and they are not a profit center. We can certainly predict some impacts, of course. We know, for example, that waiving interest penalties may result in lost revenues of up to $90,000. But waiving those penalties is the right thing to do. And yes, recreation revenues will also be lower, even though we had the benefit of a full winter season of ice rentals. Summer camp revenues will be down too, but perhaps not entirely lost. Our summer camps are ready to roll out, and we're looking at ways for youth and seniors to have access to wellness programs now. For now, we have redeployed some employees to emergency management functions, and others are working under modified operations. On the other side, there are some things we are not doing. Conferences and seminars are canceled. There are less meetings, mileage is lower. We have suspended seasonal hiring, and we canceled overtime. The savings here will help lessen that gap between revenues and expenditures for 2020. So this morning, we are taking a second look at our budget in light of these shifts. We were looking at an investment and infrastructure budget back in March. Perhaps now we're looking at a budget focused on keeping West Grey functioning and safe. The time to build new reserves might be next year. We will have completed an operations review. We will be starting the 2021 budget cycle much earlier in alignment with our new strategic vision plan. And above all, we will be on the other side of this pandemic and ready to plan for an investment budget that keeps up the momentum that this council has been building. On behalf of staff, please know that we are keen to help council with the tough decisions you need to make this morning. Today, we all roll up our sleeves, staying mindful and creating a 2020 budget that makes sure we can do what we need to do. Madam Mayor, on behalf of staff, we're ready to begin that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO Johnson. We very, very much appreciate the detailed presentation that you provided. I do want to take this, this moment to acknowledge West Grey staff. My full appreciation goes out to Chief Martin and his West Grey Police Service, Chief Schwartz and the West Grey Fire Department, all of West Grey staff and our community. We're doing our very best and it is definitely showing. One final point I'd like to make. I happened to be at our Durham landfill on Saturday, and I want to acknowledge Tammy Wheeler, who was out there assisting at the landfill site. It was seamless. So Laura, if you could please, Madam CAO rather, could you please pass that on to our Director of Infrastructure and Public Works, you know, that I really appreciate, you know, that this is just one great example of staff working together. So thank you very much. All right. Members of Council, are there any questions with regard to our Chief Administrator Officer's report? If so, please indicate by raising your hand. I'm not seeing any hands raised at this point. Supervisor Hewlett, could you assist me with this? Councillor Shea, do you have a question or a comment? As your mic gets on mute, please proceed.
Yes, thank you. It's Councillor Shea. I have a few questions as I was reading through this report. And by the way, thank you, CAO Johnson, for and Carrie, Director of Finance Mighton, for preparing this. I think this is provides a lot of answers to some of the questions that we had last week. We did last week also sort of casually discuss ways that we could find additional savings, or you know, a couple of items were brought to our attention as possible ways to reduce this year's budget. One big item being a reduction in our investment in bridge infrastructure. And so I think that we should spend a few minutes just considering if we have any other options. But before we do that, I did have a couple of just small questions that came up as I was reading through the report. So for CAO Johnson and Director Mighton, I know a number of things are on hold and some things are still moving forward. Is the social enterprise project that we received a grant for, which category is that? Is that in the on hold or moving forward category?
Through you, Madam Mayor.
Yes, thank you. I've just been unmuted. Councillor Shea, very, very good question. And Madam CAO, could you please respond to that inquiry?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for the question, Councillor Shea. The social enterprise project is still ongoing. We're having preliminary meetings, actually through Zoom, to set up some of the work that our partners at Georgian College would like to get started. The grant has been approved. We've entered into the agreement, so the work has started. It is a 2-year program, so there's a lot of preliminary work to do. We were hoping, in fact, at the end of April to be able to do the documentary broadcast, but since we can't gather and we really would like to have it an interactive in-person agenda, we are looking at potentially rescheduling that for sometime in the summer. So while we have some time, we have started a lot of important work with that.
Further, Councillor Shea?
Yes, a couple of other small things. Thank you for that. I noticed in a couple of places that you say that some of the work that's going on during this sort of downtime impacts on accessibility standards. And in Appendix A, you identify that one of the ongoing projects is further developing the multi-year accessibility plan, which I believe is a 5-year plan, which is a year or 2 out of date. I'm involved with the Accessibility Advisory Committee, and that committee has offered to participate with the development of that plan through giving community and end user input and advice. Committees are suspended for the time being. I wonder if we might look at lightening the suspension or lifting the suspension of committees. I understand that part of the reason for suspending committees was their drain on staff, but that committee does not actually have a staff support person that attends meetings. I think some committees might have the time and interest in reconvening for the purposes of discussion and planning. So I'd like to just put that out there. It doesn't have to be an item on today's agenda, but it's just something that emerged as I was reading through this document. I also see that in this list of 25, I think it is, reports pending, is the market wage comparison project still ongoing? Is that on this list? Ms. Johnson?
Oh.
CAO Johnson, are you able to talk directly into your mic? We're just not getting clarity in your voice.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I was waiting for you to see that I was ready. So I'm ready.
Enough.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
and thank you. And through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Shea. The wage review is going to be incorporated into the the operations review that we just finalized receiving the second grant for. So that project will be part of that bigger operations review.
And that will be conducted by the same consultant who will do the whole thing?
Through you, Madam Mayor, what I'm envisioning, Councillor, is putting out the RFP, which we did submit with the grant application, and it listed the components of areas of focus that we wanted to have a proposal particular to each of the areas. So operations review is one of them, the employee salary review, or market check as I prefer to call it, the job descriptions, because there has been some changes in our corporation. And we also are going to add in a council remuneration component. I'm hoping that I get quotes on each of those 4 pieces, and if we can afford to do everything, then so be it. And if we need to make decisions once the proposals come back in, then we'll look at it then as well.
Okay, thank you. As I indicated at the beginning, there are some areas that I would like to talk to about further savings within this budget, but I'll relinquish the mic for now and let someone else have a chance.
Okay, well, that's great, Councillor Shea. Just a couple things. We are going to take a look at the committees and the viability of having some, if not all. We'll take a look at when we could start those meetings, you know, in terms of resources, whether that's broadband or staff resources, or just an all-over review, and stay tuned for that. Certainly, I'm looking for questions with regard to CAO Johnson, the report and her presentation right now. We do have Director of Finance and Treasurer's report and a presentation coming up a bit later. So if you've got those operational and capital questions, hang on to those ones. I see we have 2 other members of council that have raised their hand. I would like Councillor Hergert's mic unmuted, please. Proceed, Councillor Hergert, and good morning.
Yes. Appendix A, I also was looking at this. It's quite a lofty list of ongoing agenda items to update. Some of these I'm noting are really for our corporate, you know, just a corporate angle on them. A lot of the public might not even see some of these. But, you know, the accessibility plan, as well as the website, those have a date on them that would be crucial for this year, right?
Yes.
For ensuring accessibility. So those are obviously ones that need to. I see there's a county council showcase presentation invitation from Warden McQueen, and I don't feel like I've heard much about that. But adding to this list, I'm looking, we should have the official plan and the comprehensive zoning bylaw added on there too. So maybe we need to start with the prioritization of these appendix items, and then that way we can get back to just the budget part. Thank you, Councillor Shea, for bringing up the social enterprise project. I was curious if that was going ahead this year. And could you refresh me, maybe Director of Finance, is that coming out of economic development monies? And what's the 2020 and the 2021 thought impact at this point?
Well, it's my understanding, Councillor Hergert, that has a complete connection with the West Grey Chamber of Commerce. CIO Johnson, are you able to elaborate? And I'm looking for CIO Johnson's mic to be unmuted, please. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yep. Great, thank you. I'm sorry, the RED program is a joint project with Grey Highlands, Georgian College, and then of course OMAFRA. And the budget, our contribution, Carrie could probably help me with the exact numbers, is in the base of the economic development budget, so there's no new tax dollars required for that project.
And the social enterprise documentary and just a review of that really interesting economic development model is the linkage with the Chamber. CIO Johnson?
The Chamber is actually partnering, or the Chamber has partnered with the Ontario BIA Association for Main Street Digital Grants. Their interest in the in the social enterprise project is as an interested stakeholder. They haven't gotten a formal role to play in that project yet, but we're expecting that they will be instrumental in helping us as an arm's length partner to promote the opportunity for anyone that's interested in growing their social enterprise business.
Great, thank you. And another point, Councillor Hergert, you'd mentioned about the Grey County Council showcase presentation.
Yes.
That was an invitation that was sent to myself and our CAO. I think that was circulated, but we'll ensure that it is. There will be an opportunity later this fall for West Grey to showcase our community as a whole. Every mayor and deputy within our Grey County membership was invited to provide, just have an opportunity to talk about our individual communities. So that will be upcoming. That is something that staff are working on.
Okay,
Anything further, Councillor Herger, before I go to Councillor Townsend?
Yeah, absolutely. So have we, I know that I have looked around at other municipalities and I see that some of the bigger centers are rolling back planned increases to their budget, which is what we're attempting to look for today. But they're doing that by eliminating some capital projects. And at that rate, I guess I'm looking to staff to say, is there anything that we could hold off on? I look through putting a lot of money towards reserves, not as much as last year, but I think that there may be merit in saving, savings next year or the year after when we have extra money. But this year, utilizing as much as we can, just to stay within budget, not to be doing. I really actually have a problem with the police. Go ahead for 2020.
So, Councillor Hergert, we did not hear your last statement. I'm just going to remind you to talk into the mic.
Yeah. So I have some difficulty thinking of a $4 to $6 million project with such a large unknown. We look at our revenues in, and we know that our Ontario Municipal Partnership money is less money from the province. We look at growth, we're anticipating $50,000 more growth than we received last year. I'm understanding there's a lot of hesitation in the building sector. If that, flows down through people trying to get mortgages, the housing market might just need a year to reorganize itself. So I'm curious if our CAO has looked to our insurance company. We're not using our arenas the same way we typically do. We are a month in where we haven't been using the arenas like we typically do. Is there any savings in insurance area? Have we considered speaking to Frank Cowan about any reduction in insurance for this year?
To that question, I would like CAO Johnson's mic unmuted. That's a combination of word there, sorry. CAO Johnson, would you be able to respond to that question? Please proceed.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much. And thank you for the question, Councillor Hergert. We haven't made that inquiry to our insurer, partly because a lot of our insurance is based on events, and our premiums are set, and any extra events are covered under that. I would ask our Director of Finance to help me out with this question, because she knows a lot more about the policy and the payment plan, but we haven't made that inquiry. I'm not sure if that's something that Carrie would want to look into, but maybe we can unmute Carrie and she can help me out here.
So our Director of Finance and Treasurer will respond then to that question once her mic is unmuted.
Yeah, and we haven't posed that question to the insurer. We still have the asset. If there's a fire, we still need the coverage. We have liability. You could argue that we have a heightened liability right now because of the exposure or potential exposures that are out there. We're trying to cordon off our parks and playground equipment, and to limit that, we're putting
Agreed.
signs. So we're trying to limit our liability. It's just a change in liability. Instead of the trip and fall on a sidewalk is still there. It might not be slipping inside an arena at the moment because the building's closed, but there's still a lot of exposure. But a big part of the of our insurance is our actual physical assets for replacement. So I can certainly pose the question, but I would not think that there would be any change to the premiums, because our asset, base is still the same. We still need coverage for the assets themselves plus our liability.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay,
Councillor,
I'll hold at this moment. Thank you.
thank you very much. Councillor Townsend, please, we'll have your mic unmuted. Please proceed.
Thank you. It's Councillor Townsend. First of all, a general question. Madam CAO, I really appreciated the way you sort of framed the whole position we're in and sort of how we got here, and perhaps even some of the ongoing challenges that you're dealing with, and that yourself and staff obviously are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. I really think that not just us, but anyone else who's listening in and will hear the recording needs to understand that it isn't totally shut down from a staffing point of view. And I think that's an important message to get out. And I'd like to add, my thank you to the way the staff is working and keeping things running smoothly. And that's what we're here for, right? Is to try to do the best we can. As a go forward, one of the real concerns I have is not just cherry picking because the number's right. And so when I look at the list of projects, I know they're not all there. That's pretty clear because there's a lot of capital ones that aren't there. And we're not weighting them for risk. And I think one of the things we need to look at is risk, as well as where we're considering looking at reducing this budget going forward. Last year, we chose to take an operational expense of 110,000 that we couldn't resolve where we're going to take it from. We took it from modernization, despite the fact that it indicated we probably shouldn't, and that turned out to be true. So now we have a little over 1% this year as a challenge, just because we have to put the money back. So I don't want to get into that again just by assuming. So if we're going to take a risk, or as you said, there's a lot of guessing that's happening, I'd rather guess on this year, meaning it's less of a guess. So anything we can do that we know is this year for sure that we're not going to do, whether it be capital, whether it be staff that we're spending less money on. And I don't mean reallocating, because that should also be consulted with council. And then with the emergency team, I'm assuming that would be you primarily, Madam Mayor, and the rest of the emergency team. But
well, Councillor Townsend, with regard to the emergency control group, that is myself and the senior management team. We have Chief Schwartz, we have Chief Martin, and so we've got a very good assembled team to take a look at what we need to with regard to our emergency situation.
right, thank you very much. I did know that, which is why I referred to you and the team. And so if we're going to reallocate staff that say would have done a project, and now we've got an opportunity to catch up, if you will, on something else, I'm wondering if that is the right answer, given we're looking for reductions. So I'm not speaking specifically for projects because we're not there yet in this discussion, but it's some of the theories we need to think of. I was concerned with bridges. We've already got into situations where bridges are quote unquote temporarily closed, and we're hearing objections to that.
Yes.
If we arbitrarily keep reducing that, we're going to have an issue. So that's why I'm suggesting that we need to understand what other opportunities are there. And also, if we're spending money for COVID-19, I'd like a comment from either Madam CAO or Madam Mayor, whether or not we have any indication if there's an opportunity to recover some of that, which means it may be another source of revenue. Thank you very much. That's it for now.
So with regard to COVID-19 and the expenses related to that, we are keeping a very detailed account. We are looking towards the province for any funding that would come our way. There has not at this point been an announcement. We're keenly awaiting that to occur, but I can tell you that West Grey is in position that when that announcement comes forward, we will be ready to address that request for funding. Anything further, Councillor Townsend? I would like to, with the assistance of council, move on to item B, which is the staff report from our Director of Finance and Treasurer. Anything further, Councillor?
Yeah, one other comment, if you don't mind.
Of course, please go ahead.
The other thing is, and I know I've shared this with staff and yourself, is that when you look at the 2019 actuals, there's a lot of departments that are under budget. And I know sometimes figures can be misleading. They don't really tell the whole story, but some of these are pretty significant, and yet the budget is roughly the same again this year. And when I talk about significant, I talk about hundreds of thousands or even $1 million or so at times. And so I'd like to make sure that we understand that when someone has a, I don't know, $100,000 budget and only spends $50,000, and we see it go back up to 100,000 this year, my concern is, do we really need to budget that high? And so that's another aspect that I'd like to make sure we're examining.
Thank you for that. Is there a comment, Director Mighton, please?
Yeah, the 2019 numbers that you would have seen on the draft budget, there's still work to be done. I worked all weekend on trying to get some of those numbers finalized for year end. As we keep revisiting the budget, it takes away from trying to do the year end numbers. We may be lucky when all is said and done to be total 100,000, good or bad, but there's a lot of work to be done. Reserve transfers, accrued liabilities, accrued wages, reserve revenues that need to go, development charges revenues that need to be allocated to the development charges reserve fund. So there is a lot of work. I've been trying to get that done, but there is not hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting on the table there. It will be very tight by the time we get 2019 year-end numbers finished, which I'm trying to plug away at in between all of the other work.
Well, we acknowledge all of your hard work. Thank you very much. Councillor Townsend, does that satisfy your inquiries at this moment?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I do see that Deputy Mayor Hutchinson has his hand raised. Please go ahead as soon as your mic is unmuted. Yep, go ahead, Deputy.
Thank you very much, Mayor Robinson. I just have a real brief couple things I'd like to say. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
I'd like to thank our staff for their all their hard work that they've been doing. Also like to say thank you to
Deputy Mayor Hutchinson.
Yes.
We were hearing you when I said yes.
There.
We are not hearing you now.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, but talk directly into the mic. And could you please restart? We'd appreciate it.
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Just got to get adjusted here. First, I'd just like to thank the CAO for her update.
We have, Deputy Mayor, we have lost your audio. Please try again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me? Is this better?
That is much better.
Okay.
Talk directly into the mic.
I am. I just got to get positioned here. So anyways, what I'd like to say is I'd like to thank the CAO. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. For the opening comments there on our verbal presentation. I'd like to thank all of our staff for the work that they did behind the scenes during the pandemic. I also want to just say thank you to all our police, fire, and our frontline health workers, really holding this community together. And they're certainly putting themselves in harm's way, but they are certainly keeping the rest of us safe. And the only other thing that I do want to reference is, and I'm going to, just before we get into number B, is I just want to make sure that some of the projects that we unanimously agreed to pursue, I think we need to stick to that, because we're not, yes, we're looking for savings, but there's a couple projects in particular that must carry on. We do not need to go backwards. We need to just keep plowing forward, as small as it is. We came from, I would say, below minimal standards. We are above there and exceeding in a lot of other areas. So I would like to see us stick to that course and keep this above the minimum standards. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for those comments. Really appreciate it. And also thank you for figuring out your audio volume that you need to ensure that your message is getting through. All right, with that, I'm not seeing any other hands raised. I will take that as an indication that we can move on to item B, 5B, staff report. This report is from Director of Finance and Treasurer, as well as our Chief Administrative Officer. It's a joint effort. The report update, operations, finance, and 2020 budget. Director Mighton, will you begin this discussion?
Yep, you've had the report. Just looking for council direction on where they want this reduction to land, suggesting that if we focus on that, then we can look at what options are out there. But yeah, we've presented a sample, but looking for your priority list. All the same pressures existed when we put this budget together, so that's still there. So it's a matter of getting council's priority on where they want to go.
Well, thank you for that. CAO Johnson, we're going to unmute your mic, and this is an opportunity also to provide some information before I open the mics up for questions from members of council. CAO Johnson, please go ahead.
And members of will get there. I think perhaps it is important to remember that we are operating under a whole different premise than what we had envisioned back in March. And staff have been busy keeping things moving and answering inquiries. And quite frankly, when I was last in the office, because we are alternating our office days, the team that I'm on, many of the calls were just information, and people just wanted to have someone to speak with and someone to help them with some of the questions that are, you know, every day there's new questions. So I think, you know, as I'm listening, and I know council wants to continue the momentum and continue the progress and look at our capital program, it's really important to remember that there are some things in this capital budget that we must do, and that includes meeting minimum maintenance standards, legislative requirements, and our operating budgets. While they may not look like we're using all the money that we need, we absolutely are. I am very proud of the budgets that staff put together, particularly in the operations side. There's not a lot of extras in those lines, as you know, when you go through the line by line. So we will have to have some tough decisions today, but I think you know, the Director of Finance is here to help with that, and I'm happy to answer any other questions as we work through this staff report.
Great, thank you, CAO Johnson. I'm looking at the dashboard before me to see if there's any hands raised from members of council that would like to begin this discussion. Let's get going and let's get this budget recommended for approval for council. I'm looking to Councillor Townsend now. Please unmute his mic. Please go ahead.
Yes, Councillor Townsend. The first question I guess I'd like to ask is, realizing that you are using staff to deal with COVID-19, do you have any idea what the level of expenditure is that we would hope at some point to get some form of recovery? I did read in at least one of the announcements from the province that one of the things they are looking at is supporting municipalities during this time as well. So there is funding coming. It's just whether it's enough and where it goes.
Director Mighton, could you provide some response? Please.
Yeah, we haven't seen anything yet to know any details. The emergency services are probably the main ones that'll be facing significant overtime and challenges that way. But I don't have a quantity, a number to put on that at this point as it keeps moving forward. But yeah, I don't know. So far, there's been no indication as to any details or level of funding that may or may not come through. So it's a guessing game at this point.
Councillor Townsend, I can reassure you, and I've said this at the top of this meeting, we are watching for that funding and we'll absolutely be active in our request for that. I do see that CAO Johnson hand is raised. Could we unmute her mic, please? Go ahead, CAO Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much. And to your question, Councillor Townsend, as the Director has indicated, there hasn't been any official commitment on funding or financial assistance, but we are preparing for that because we know that the province has been doing a wonderful job supporting Ontarians. We have implemented a tracking system for all of the functions that staff are doing that would be related to the COVID response, so that we are prepared to be have those reports at a relatively complete stage, depending on what kind of reporting the province requires. So we are keeping an eye, and we are being mindful of the potential for that kind of recovery.
Anything further, Councillor Townsend?
Yes, can you share a magnitude that we might be looking at to date?
If I may, Madam Mayor?
Sure. Please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor, I'm not exactly clear on what you think of the word magnitude would relate to, but as far as operational impact, as I had said in my opening comments, we are making sure that our facilities are ready should they need to be redeployed. We've seen that happening in other communities in Grey County already. Lots and lots of work that has been started, and it's being tracked, in the way of sanitizing, in the way of maintenance, those sorts of things. In addition, I have redeployed some office support, or some office staff, to make sure that, should we need to go into a full incident management system, we've got everything in place. We did just pass our emergency plan, but there's pieces in there that we've always wanted to make sure we're doing best practices. So a lot of work's going into that in the way of volunteer management, in the way of making stronger connections with community groups and the resources that they may have for us. Just those kinds of the legwork that we need to do is happening now, so that we are ready.
Right. So if we close down all of our buildings and all we had to do was base management, and we didn't have to do the sanitization and all that, my assumption is our staffing costs would be less. So do we have any anticipation in the way of a number? And I'm not looking for, $3,212.18. I'm looking at something in the neighborhood of 25, 50, 100, 1,000, that eventually we are going to say that we contributed to the COVID project, and therefore, we would ask to get at least some or part of that back, if not all of it. And I'm trying to figure out, if we're going to be looking at predicting the future, you're right, we're going to take some guesses and some intelligent and educational guesses, but that's the kind of thing I'm trying to look at to say, is that an opportunity to say that's part of our reduction?
So what I could tell you, Councillor, let me address it first, Madam CAO. We are providing a very detailed account of our spending as it directly relates to this pandemic. When funding becomes available from the province, we will address that completely. So I'm just wondering, I'll go to our Director of Finance to see if there's anything further, but we did the same thing in, it's just the detailed that we need to keep account for. All of our department heads are doing that, and that is certainly one of the reasons that you declare an emergency, of which this municipality did very responsibly. So I know you're not looking for the number right now. We are providing it in a descriptive way, and I'm looking to Director Mighton to provide an answer, and I'm hoping that at this point it satisfies you, and when we do have a number, we will absolutely bring it forward to Council. I'm hoping that is of assistance. Director Mighton, could you please fill in the blanks here, if you could?
Yeah, like previously when we've had states of emergency, the types of expenditures that are eligible are only those that would be over and above your normal operating. So if we would normally pay someone 40 hours a week, it would only be if we needed them beyond that, if we were paying them the extra 10 hours. It's not, that's typically how it's done, how it's operated in the past. Whether that's what it's going to be like in this situation, I don't know. But it's only items that we would not have normally spent anyways. If we're, as far as staffing goes, or materials and supplies, it's only those that are over and above our normal operations that would be even eligible for any funding. But that's the basis that previous emergencies have followed. I don't know if this one will follow that same path.
Thank you for that. Councillor Townsend, please. Anything further?
Can I just say that a different way then? So
Sure.
what I think I heard you say, Director Mighton, was that we are, anything that's over budget that we're spending on COVID might be eligible, but anything within our budget is not. So we shouldn't look there.
Yeah, it's not that it's over budget. It's just if we would normally have incurred expenses, like when you're looking at staffing, we would have staff for X number of hours in our daily operations. They're not going to look at reimbursing us, or in the past, they wouldn't have looked to reimburse us for the time that we would normally have been, even though it's spent on different activities. So it's not so much over budget as it is just expenses that we wouldn't normally incur.
Okay.
Thank you. I have Councillor Hutchinson, Councillor Shea, and then Councillor Herger. Councillor Hutchinson, your mic is being unmuted.
Good morning.
Please go ahead. Good morning.
Councillor Hutchison here. I'd like to thank, first of all, the staff for the report that they put forward, and all the staff that are doing everything they can to get us through this pandemic. I'd just like to say that I'm ready to move forward. We need to pass a budget, and realizing that there's numerous unknowns. We don't have all the answers, and we may not have the answers for some time. I have a concern when it comes to not using our taking away our bridge reserve and our library cuts, but we have to do something to get the budget down. And if that's what it takes, then so be it. Realizing that there are a number of things that may not happen this year just because we don't know how long this is going to last and how much work we can get done. So it's really tough to make some decisions, but we have to pass a budget and move forward. I have a couple questions.
Go ahead.
Which I can ask, and then I'll maybe get a response after. One is, and it's been brought up, are there other reserves that we could use instead of the bridge reserve? And Director Mighton, maybe you can respond to that, given the situation. And the other one has to do with our Director of Infrastructure. Are there any projects that are not able to go ahead due to the time frame, that we're already a little bit behind the 8 ball in terms of getting RFPs out there and where we are in terms of spring activity? So I'm not sure, maybe the director can talk about if there's any projects that might not happen. But basically, my thoughts are, we have some recommendations by staff that we should be listening to our staff. They're the professionals. You know, we really are grasping at straws here. Nobody has the answer. We have, if we can bring the budget in at 3%, somewhere in the 3% range, I'm happy. And hopefully our people will be happy with that rather than a 6%. And basically we'll have to cross bridges when we get to them. That's a bit of a pun, I guess.
Very classy.
If they're open. So anyways, I'll leave it at that, and maybe I can get a response to those questions.
Sure. Councillor Hutchinson, what I'll do is I will first ask our Director of Finance and Treasurer to respond to the reserve question, and then Director of Infrastructure and Public Works to talk about proposed capital projects, and then I'll bring the mic back to you. Okay. Director Mighton, please.
Yeah, so in looking at our capital budget, we were transferring a total of $355,000 into various reserves. $275,000 of that is a bridge reserve, so that leaves $80,000 for various recreation. You've got the capital list. We've got a few small recreation projects that we were putting money aside for a future build. The washrooms at the town hall, mezzanine lift, a roof, playground equipment, municipal dams, the fire truck reserves, and computer IT reserve. So those other reserves, other than the bridge reserve, total $80,000 on the capital side.
Thank you. Director Sherinsky, could you please respond to the proposed capital projects inquiry?
Good morning. Good morning, Your Worship. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, please proceed.
Super. I have reached out to all of the various contractors that would potentially, and engineering firms that would be involved with our capital projects for 2020. And essentially, there are none of the capital projects that we have listed are subject to, like, that. In other words, that they won't, that they can't happen or will not be going forward this year due to whatever reason. COVID. I mean, there's going to be some different protocols and procedures in place that may sort of make things take a little bit longer, perhaps. But as far as the bridge work, the tar and chip work, the sidewalk work, and hot mix work, essentially, those are all systems go. And the professionals that I've been speaking with in the field have said that they are moving forward with taking in tenders and so forth, and proceeding accordingly.
Boy, that's really nice to hear. Anything further, Director Shurinsky?
I don't have anything further to add to that. But to succinctly answer the question, there's nothing on our list that is not going to be happening due to COVID.
Thank you. I'm back to you, Councillor Hutchinson.
Yeah, so that's great. It's good news that things will be able to move forward. So yeah, so there is that unknown question about money and reserves for bridges and where we're going with that. But again, it's one of those unknowns that we don't know if we're going to have funding to go ahead with that. And again, like I said, maybe it's something we have to manage when the time comes up. But right now, we don't know. So I'd be in favor of passing the budget based on the recommendations by our staff and getting this thing done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I've got Councillor Shea. We'll unmute your mic. Please proceed.
I agree with Councillor Hutchinson. Point that we need to get the budget passed today, and that I think we're quite close to that. But I do think that I sat in on an OGRA teleconference last week, and they were talking about infrastructure projects in this current situation. And one of the people said that they were breaking down their projects into 3 categories: projects which must go forward, projects which could go forward, and projects which could be set back. So I think even though it's possible that we could do all of the projects that we planned, I'm not sure if we should be doing all the projects that we planned, specifically because of the bridge reserve. And I think it's a little strange to constantly be characterizing it as a bridge reserve, as though it's a rainy day fund that we're going to use somewhere down the road. It was money that we were putting aside to be able to match possible grants if they came forward. It was money we were putting aside to continue to address our huge infrastructure deficit that we're looking at. So to me, the bridge reserve would go in the must go forward category. I agree that we should be passing the budget at the level that it's at. We shouldn't be increasing beyond the level that we've determined right now. So what I was thinking is, could we examine a couple of other projects which are on the books and see if they could be characterized as must go forward or possibly could be set back. So specifically, we had, just looking at my notes here, something like a $28,000 increase to the library, a large part of which was due to adding new staff. I think there was a part-time children's librarian position, a half-time position, and expanded summer student employment positions. So if we took $25,000 of that, and I'm thinking these are numbers that I would like to reallocate back to the bridge reserve. So if we took $25,000 from that library fund, if we took, say, we had $15,000 budgeted for painting the new Stat Hall. Is that a must go forward project, or is that could be set back project. We had sidewalk replacement in Ayton. We had new chairs for the council chamber. We have the household hazardous waste project. Those together would come out to almost $100,000. If we put those into the could be set back project, we would be able to invest $100,000 back into our infrastructure problem. Additionally, we have some areas that other savings have been likely identified in the report that was prepared for us. Conference attendance, fuel costs, borrowing costs, and we don't have numbers attached to those, but I would suggest that we could summer student hiring costs for the recreation program, like camp council.
Councillor Shea, I'm thinking that your voice has dropped off, but I'm indicating here that your mic has been muted. Could Councillor Shea's mic be unmuted? Okay. Councillor Shea, if you could hear me, and I hope you can, I'm wondering if you have muted your mic on your end. We've tried to unmute on this end. I wonder if you could just press the unmute. Okay, so I'm not seeing Councillor Shea right now. When he does appear on the board again, I'm going to go directly back to him. All right, Councillor Shea, note that when you raise your hand again and we have an unmute, you will have the mic. I will ensure that that does occur. All right, so I am going to move on with Councillor Hergert, then Councillor Townsend. Councillor Hergert's mic could be unmuted at this point, please. Okay, proceed, Councillor Hergert.
Yes, thank you very much. I was liking where Councillor Shea was going on that.
Yeah.
The money for bridge reserve was not really a reserve. It was really, if we got a grant that we already had one part, we had the province part, we didn't have the Fed part, then we would have the money to make up the rest of the project, which, as Councillor Shea had mentioned, we are in an infrastructure deficit. So I am not in favor of taking any money out of the bridge reserve money of $275,000. And absolutely, to the point Councillor Shea was making, we need to look at each one of these library, the chairs for the council chambers. I mean, can we just take the chairs for the council chambers out? We know that's like, we're not even sitting in them. It doesn't matter this year. You know,
Okay.
is there any?
Yeah, I think if we, what we're doing here is we're making a decision on what is a go and what's not. So thank you for that. I'm just going to take this time and have Director Mighton just comment on what Councillor Shea has brought forward in terms of it potentially represents a 1% that we can address. But Director Mighton, could you please comment?
Yeah, so I think he was starting his list there and then got cut off, but
yeah.
When he mentioned the household hazardous waste, that is not coming from the tax levy, that's coming from a landfill reserve. So I don't know that you want to use a landfill reserve to move that over. So that $41,000 is not a tax levy item. The $15,000 for painting the hall, yeah, that's was a tax levy item. The $3,500 for chairs, that was a tax levy item. On the sidewalk, there is only, I was just pulling it up, $10,000 that is from the actual tax levy this year. Out of the of 30,000, the other 20,000 was put into reserve last year for sidewalks towards the school in Ayton that weren't completed. So that would only be a $10,000 levy cut, again, unless you want to take money from a sidewalk reserve and reallocate it to a bridge reserve. Those are all discretionary reserves. It's just that was the purpose that it was originally set aside for. So the actual dollar amount from the tax levy is only $10,000. So that gets us 2, 3, 4. We're about $53,000 of tax levy as opposed to the 100. I just want to caution, if we start looking too finally at operational, he was suggesting conferences. It will be difficult, or you'll be facing putting that back in the budget unless you're not going to conferences again next year if it opens up. The other piece is some of those, you know, we might have lower fuel costs, savings from conferences. Those may help to offset some of the $80,000 to $90,000 in the penalty and interest that we've waived at the last meeting.
Right.
And that may help to soften the blow. Some of those short-term temporary savings, because fuel is cheap right now, but it's probably going to change. So some of those temporary savings, we might not want to just lower the budget for. It may help to offset some of those lost revenues that we know we're facing as well. So it's just a caution.
So another area I'd like to address is the grants to organization.
Councillor Hergert, I'm just going to interrupt you now. I did make a dedication comment that when Councillor Shea returned, we would continue with him. So, and as I note, you're entering a different discussion point. At this point, we've been kind of following along similar to what Councillor Shea has mentioned. I will get back to you. Councillor Shea, I would like his mic unmuted, and I will call him forward to continue his discussion. And thank you, Councillor Hergert, for that latitude.
Thank you. I don't know what happened. My internet just cut out there for some reason. But I see the conversation has continued without me, so great. And I see people are identifying possible things that could be shifted back to infrastructure, bridge infrastructure, and taking it out of other areas. So I'm happy to pass this over to others to bring ideas forward. But we did notice, well, I think you identified the ones that I had already spoken about. I don't know if you got around to library wages.
Well, no, we haven't, but I'm wondering, were you able to hear Director Mighton's response to your suggestions, or do we need a recap?
No, I think I heard the most of it.
Okay.
And one point that comes up when we have a short-term reduction of a budget need or budget allocation is that if you take it out this year, you have to put it back in next year. And I understand that. I understand that if we take, 1% out of our, sundry capital projects, or if we take 1% out of, conference travel or something like that, that's a number that we have to automatically put in next year, and that becomes our zero base point to start budgeting again next year. I understand that, and that's any savings that we introduce this year are going to mean a tax increase next year to compensate for it. But I think that's the sort of situation that we're in. We're in a kind of a crisis situation. A lot of people in their own personal finance are going through this, where they're having to put off things, cancel things. They're suffering loss of work, loss of wages, and they'll hopefully once things sort themselves out, they'll be able to start to get themselves back on their feet. But you have to do the hard work first, and then do the remediary work later. So I think we're doing the hard work now, and next year it'll be our job to explain to citizens why the taxes are going up so much, because in part we were trying to save money this year during the crisis. So I just wanted to sort of nip that argument in the bud, if I may. But I'll pass the mic on to the other people who want to speak.
Well, thank you, Councillor Shea. Director Mighton, could you please comment on Councillor Shea's inquiry about the library budget? The library, I think it was 15 or 16,000 was their status quo budget increase, and then the balance, there was about 25
I think that was for new hires and enhanced items. Similar to, it is a board, council can lower the amount. We can't tell them how to spend it, but we can say, yes, your increase isn't 40,000, it's only 15,000.
Right.
And work within your budget, and here's what it is. And we can give that back to them that way. But that's certainly acceptable if that's the direction of council.
Councillor Shea, you still have the mic before I move on. Is there anything further?
Given that 25 of that is for new hires and the library is closed and people are working from home, I think we should be entertaining that $25,000 reduction.
Okay, and I can tell you that as we're moving along here, our Director of Finance and Treasurer, Director Mighton, is making notes in terms of potential reductions. So
are those up on the screen?
No, they are not.
Okay.
Sorry about that, but she is writing them down, and we'll be able to verbally address them at any point that council does inquire. Correct, Director Mighton? Perfect. Anything further, Councillor Shea? At this time. You're welcome. Councillor Hergert, you now have the mic again. We'll have you unmuted. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you. So I was going to pick up at the grants to organizations. We have $29,800 is requested in full. This year, I think that we should realign our priorities to the hospital donation of $13,000 and the food bank. I would like to increase that to $3,000 and skip everything else that.
So are you still speaking, Councillor Hergert? Because we have no audio on you.
I am. It says, hello?
We got as far as $3,000. You'll have to recap what you're saying and talk directly into the mic.
Yeah, so the food bank should, I feel it should go to $3,000, and the hospital donation that we do for $13,000 for a total of $16,000 there, and get rid of the remainder up to the $30,000 that was requested. So we could have a bit of a savings there and align our priorities of the hospital and the food bank for this year.
Okay, Director Mighton is jotting that down. Is there anything further you wish to speak on?
Yes, for the library, I agree with the reduction. Just this year, it doesn't quite make sense to add another person, just in light of where we are presently. The other thing I was curious about, and maybe our CAO could speak to this, the federal Canadian benefit, if employers retain employees, and we, West Grey, could potentially receive 25% of a wage if we were redeploying people but keeping them on staff.
Okay, I'm going to go to Director Mighton for that. Councillor Hurd, I would like to know if we in fact are eligible. I'm questioning that. Director Mighton on Councillor Hergert's inquiry.
Yeah, so far any of these programs like the 75% wage subsidy, public sector is not eligible. It's specifically excluded from those. Those are intended for commercial, industrial enterprises, and they specifically, when you get down into the details, the public sector is not eligible for that program.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay. Anything further before I go on to Councillor Townsend? Councillor Hergert.
Yeah, so I look at the Normanby parking lot finishing $5,000, Normanby playground reserve, Durham had a playground reserve. I get those, I'm all fine to cut. I just don't see that this is the year to put money away in a reserve. If we're trying to cut a budget, we don't have it, we can't put it away. Looking at the Durham Town Hall accessible washroom, that's just money going into a reserve as well for a later project, correct?
Director Mighton, on the reserve inquiries here, please.
Yes, that's correct. It's putting money into reserve for that washroom project, yes.
And with regard to the other identification of reserves, could you provide some comment? And also, I would look to Supervisor Hewlett as well.
The playgrounds, those are the Normanby Centennial Hall, and that one was a playground that was transferred to reserve. Parking lot, that was, where was that one? Just looking to find. So that was parking lot paving. So that is not a transfer to reserve, but a project that would be, could be deferred. Yeah.
Supervisor Hewlett, any comment?
No, exactly what Director Mighton said is the plan.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Hergert, anything further at this moment?
The mezzanine hydraulic lift, we have to keep something there. Most things I would say, if it's going, a reserve, get rid of it this year. But the mezzanine hydraulic lift, we were keeping $5,000 there just for the actual moving of tables up and down, right? The actual doing of the work.
Yes. Anything further, Supervisor Hewlett, on that? Or Director Mighton? They're just consulting.
I'm not sure if that was needed for actual moving things up and down. I think Tom may have that built into his operational budget, renting the forklift or whatever it is that he rents to move those. Currently, those are for when he does do those. It's the two big Lions events. So again, one of these, will they be continuing for this season?
Yeah.
But I think he has enough in his operational budget to cover that lift or rental of a forklift or however it's done.
Before you go any further, Councillor Hergert, I would like CAO Johnson just to provide any additional information, but thank you, Director Mighton, on that. CAO Johnson, your mic is open.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor, for that question. My recollection of the forklift project, it currently, those chairs and tables are raised and lowered through the generous support of our volunteers. Perhaps not the most sustainable model. The $5,000 was put into a reserve so that we could actually implement something that's much more sustainable. And as the director has indicated, that probably will take the shape of renting per event instead of just having a piece of equipment, unless we can figure out a way of deploying it for other uses. So the 5K was put aside so that we could improve our process. If council would like to defer that, that's not a problem. We can bring it forward in the 2021 budget.
And I note that our Director of Finance and Treasurer is also noting that. Councillor Hergert, further, or can I move on to other members of council now?
You can move on. Thank you very
Perfect.
much.
Councillor, you're quite welcome. Councillor Townsend, please. We'll have your mic unmuted. Please proceed.
Yes, Councillor Townsend. Before I ask my other question or make my other comment, I wonder if Director Mighton could summarize as a number how many transfer to reserves are for future expense or possible future expense.
Good question.
Capital side, $355,000. That includes the $275 for the bridge reserve. So there's $80,000 of other reserves. For
so
future
80 is for
projects.
future.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to go back and talk about the bridge reserve at a different level. We're talking about future, and we're talking about 80,000. For the 275, that is specifically for the wooden bridge. That was the discussion we finally got to. I think we needed somewhere in the neighborhood of 400,000, but we cut it to 275. The grant requested had been declined by the government, but they came to us and said some other people that were there all of a sudden didn't qualify anymore. So could we please resubmit it? This is something that says if we get asked to move ahead because the government says you're approved, we have, I believe, 300,000 or so from a private person that was involved in the design, dollars that are potentially coming to us for that bridge. We will have the grant from the government, whatever amount that will be. We will, if we get rid of the 275, we will have no dollars for our portion. And that's going to create a serious issue. And recognizing the government came to us and said, please reapply, I'm hoping that's a good sign, meaning we were close, just not quite there. That's a guess. So is everything else we're talking about, other than the reserves when we talk about for future. So my feeling is if we take that 275 away, Our risk is that we are going to qualify. We will have a private person offering 300 plus. We'll have the government offering some dollars. And by the time we're done, we will somehow have to come up with our third or so, and it won't be there at all. And it all won't be there now, even if we are successful with the 275. So that's the reason I'm suggesting we need to look at other areas, because there is a high risk that we could in fact get the other two funding sources and we won't have our own. And that's a large number. So I like the idea of going and removing the 80,000 for future for this year. I like the idea of looking at the grants we give, and that was around 30,000 according to Councillor Hergert. That's the number I remember. And I'd even go further and say, do we eliminate the 30,000 for this year? We're not going to be doing much in other areas. And again, Councillor Shea had a comment about, are there things that don't have to or could be deferred? Like, I want to manage our risk to the best level. I'm going to guess in the future, previous councils have done the same thing with bridge reserves or capital reserves. And that's why we're in the position we are right now. We have a potential $80 million deficit on bridges. That's what we were shown in the past. That's a large number. And while it seems that it gets us out of our problem right now, again, I do not want to make that mistake. If we have to reduce some of it, I guess we'll not have a choice. But I do believe staff could probably find 275 of, I'm going to use more discretionary than the one we have on the table. And I don't know if that's possible, so I throw that question out as well. Thank you.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Director Mighton, could you provide a response?
And I think we're looking, council, this is your budget. You need to find the 275. You tell us where you want this to cut or whatever it is. We will take your direction. You see your project list ahead of you. What projects do you want to cut and defer? You know, what reserve transfers? This is your budget, and it's time for council, if I can just say so respectfully, to make these decisions and give staff direction. Everything is justifiable. We went through this very detailed up to this point. So now it's finding out what your new priorities are and what it is that you want to do. You know, do we want to continue to be an economic driver and continue to have projects moving forward? Or do we want to put money aside? That's entirely looking for council direction. We will implement whatever you advise us. We will try to help advise you on the consequences and the risks of the decisions, but it's council's choice as to what gets cut from this budget.
Well, thank you, Director Mighton. I'm going to have CAO Johnson's mic unmuted. Please proceed, CAO Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for your inquiries, Councillor Townsend, about the potential for a grant for this wooden bridge project. I have to thank all of council. I'm quite encouraged that you are still thinking about, you know, a reserve of some sort of transfer. I'm not sure that 275 is what we need entirely, but it is nice to see that if we look at other, you know, borrowing from other projects to continue to at least put something away is a really great idea. If I might, Madam Mayor, I'd like to unmute our Director of Infrastructure and Public Works. If we were successful in receiving the grant for the wooden bridge, there's an awful lot of steps before we actually need to spend all of our contribution. Vance, could you give us an outline of how you see that bridge project unfolding should we be successful? And we wouldn't even know about that until toward the end of 2020, I think. Thank you.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, that we wouldn't be utilizing the entire dollar amount. Director Sherinsky, could you please comment now?
Yes, Your Worship, can you hear me all right?
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you kindly. Through Your Worship, with that particular project, first of all, to succinctly answer or to further the point of the CAO, the funding application was essentially, if we were going to be successful, the government, and I don't have the exact figures right here in front of me, but it was somewhere in the vicinity of you know, the government would give us like 663,000 and we would have to come up with the rest, type of thing with the wooden bridge structure. And we have yet to hear in writing from the federal government whether or not where we stand, etc., other than the fact that we didn't qualify for the first round and we were unsuccessful in getting that money. To add to the point, further to Councillor Townsend's point, council was approached by a consultant, whereby if West Grey was unsuccessful with government grant money, then they would be interested in paying a portion or of the wooden bridge structure, but that without government funding, the consultant would forward some money and the West Grey would have to come up with the rest, to the tune at the time, where the consultant was prepared to put approximately $300,000 on the table, and that council would have to come up with $1 million to continue the wooden bridge project. So those are the two parts, if you will, if I could quickly recap. Whereas the first part was to get funding from the federal government, that didn't come through. The second offer or the second opportunity would be that the consultant would put the money up, approximately $300,000, and council would have to come up with the rest. That didn't continue. And so where we sit right now with the wooden bridge structure is we still have no funding from the government, and I'll say unofficially, through our meetings with the bridge consultant, they're saying that it's not likely that we're going to get funding. But yet I haven't had anything in writing just yet to bring to council. So that's, I know I'm a little bit all over the map here, your worship, members of council, but essentially with the wooden bridge project, that's where we stand right now. Very undetermined. And as far as a second response from the government with respect to funding, a second round situation, I haven't heard from them yet either. So.
Okay, thank you very much. You did provide a lot of clarity and detail in that response, so we do appreciate it. Councillor Townsend, anything further? There are other members of council that would like to speak, but you have the mic.
Yes, I just want to clarify that when we reduce the amount to 275, we said we will put more in next year. So obviously we're going to defer that whole initiative by another year, because I don't think we can turn around and say, if we were going to put, say, 150,000 in the next year, I don't think we can say we'll put the 275, then the 150, and now we've got a 4% increase just for bridges. That's just not going to fly with everything else we're going to have next year. So by making the decision this year, we are actually starting to slow down our bridge work because there's too many pressures elsewhere, and I don't think we're going to get the growth in our residents that we're projecting at this point, because there is a slowdown in the construction there. So that revenue may not come in, and I'd like Director Mighton to make a comment on that one if she will. And my last comment is that if we're not looking everywhere, then we're putting all of the risk and all of the challenges in one place. If we spread it out, then we're actually making our risk in each area a little bit different, and things will change next year. We know that, but at least we will have spread out the challenges we may have in the future.
Okay, thank you for that. Director, any comment before I move on to Councillor Hutchinson? Nothing at this point? Okay. Thank you, Councillor Townsend. I'll look for your hand again as we move along, and I speak for all members of council. If you have your hand raised, it will be acknowledged. We're now looking at Councillor Hutchinson, having your mic unmuted. Please go ahead.
Yeah, Councillor Hutchinson here. My concern with canceling projects, like we started looking at canceling this, canceling that. My concern with canceling projects, these are things that we know we can do and we have the money to do them. For something like the bridge, which we don't know that we're going to do, whether it's this year or next year or whenever, or whether we even get the grant. So I'm concerned that we're canceling things that we can move forward with and we have the money to do it versus something that we don't know whether we can do, and maybe we'll never be able to do the wooden bridge. We don't know that for sure, but I have a real concern with that. I know we need to put money away for bridges, but given the situation we're in, I'm so doubtful whether we'll be building any bridges this year anyways, and it'll probably be next year or maybe the year after. So I do have a concern with that part of it. I just had one question maybe for Director Mighton, and development charges, what percentage of that might be able to go towards bridges in the future?
Oh, good question.
I don't have the new study. We used to have about just under 9% was eligible in our old study. I'm not sure. I will try to pull up the new study and see where it's at. But under the old study, it was only just under 8.91% was eligible under our old study.
Right. So that is a discussion we're having about development charges, and there potentially could be some monies there, which could be prioritized for bridges. So just a thought there. Thank you.
Okay, you're quite welcome. Director Mighton, I'm wondering, based on some of the suggestions for reductions, and if we do include, because it was also commented on a reduction to our bridge reserve, where would we land right now, just on a proposed basis, where it's nothing that we've determined, but as we're chipping away here or reducing, what percentage are we falling at, and the dollar figure, or whatever you could provide?
Yep, so just to summarize, without the bridge reserve, reducing the library by 25,000, deferring the painting of the Newstead Hall, 15,000, removing council chairs, 3,500, removing the sidewalks, the levy portion was 10,000, grants to organizations, only doing 3,000 for the food bank and 13,000 for the hospital is a reduction of 13,800. Not doing the Normanby parking lot paving is 5,000. Removing the Centennial Hall playground reserve transfer, 5,000. Removing the admin IT reserve transfer, 10,000. Removing the municipal dam reserve transfer, 20,000. Removing the town hall washroom reserve, 10,000. Removing the Lions Park playground equipment reserve, 5,000. Removing the Newstead Hall roof reserve, 5,000. The other 20,000 of reserve transfers was going into a fire truck reserve and then being pulled out for the purchase of a fire truck in Newstead. So I haven't pulled that one out. So that would give us $127,300. $127,300.
Okay. And with portion of the bridge reserve, because that was also addressed by some members of council.
How much was not the full 275?
Well, you know what? I'm going to go back to Councillor Hutchinson. You have the mic open. Was there, in your discussion about bridge reserve, were you anticipating a number, a dollar figure with respect to a reduction of that reserve?
No, I didn't have a number. I'm just, I don't have a problem with taking money, not putting money into reserves and some of those things, but I do want to see us still go ahead with some projects if they're able to go ahead, versus putting money into reserve and just sitting and waiting. So that's my comment.
Fair enough. So Director Mighton, based on the 127,300, what is the percentage reduction off the 6.64 that we walked in this morning with? And believe me, that was just a recommendation. We're looking at obviously addressing the climate, economic climate. Thank you for doing the calculation.
1.3%.
So from 6.64, in terms of our timing for this meeting, takes us down to a grand total of?
We're at 5.33% or $520,000.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. We're still going at it. And I've got two members of council here. I'm going to go with the first-time speaker. So I am going to go with Councillor Hamilton and then Councillor Hergert. So please unmute Councillor Hamilton, please.
Thank you, Mayor Robinson, and good morning, everyone. I feel a little late to the conversation, but no, I've been actively listening and really appreciative of staff's thoughtful report. Thank you, staff, and thank you for all the work you're doing behind the scenes. And good morning, everyone. I'm following along. I feel like I'm resonating with a lot of the conversation. I also have concern about reducing our investment in our bridges, whether they be for this year or for future bridges, because we know we have a significant infrastructure deficit. I think our one consultant suggested there's $20 million worth of repairs within the next 5 years. So we just never know when those bridges also might need a critical investment or critical repair in a way that we don't plan and time for. So I'd really prefer not to be eroding our investment in bridges, and I see bridges as a must and not a want, or a must need, not a like to have. So I was going through the budget with a fine tooth comb, like I know a lot of our citizens are going through their home budgets and looking for those things that can wait another year or just don't need to happen. And so thank you for councillors who've raised quite a few points that I had on my list as well as question marks. I do have a question about just the timeline for our police station this year. So I note that as part of our capital, there's $75,000 going towards the police station. And do we have a sense of if that project is a go for this year, or if that's something that might, given just the way timing's all lining up, is that something that might be delayed until 2021?
I can tell you, before I go to the Director of Finance and Treasurer, this is a must for our community and our West Grey Police Service. We've committed to the land purchase. We would be moving ahead with the RFP. So we'll talk in terms of timing, but I could tell you categorically that this is an essential and a very important project for West Grey and our West Grey Police Service. So Director Mighton, I wonder if you could just provide some further information on this.
Yeah, we're waiting for some planning, rezoning type stuff to see if that can continue to move forward. In the meantime, we can get the designs and be ready to go whenever the planning zoning changes are completed on there. But we can do all of that preliminary design work and RFP work so that then whenever we're able to hit the ground running, then they can get shovel ready.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Carrie Might. Thank you, Director Might.
Yeah. Before we go any further, Councillor Hamilton, I would like our clerk, Mark Turner, to provide some more information.
Great.
So the zoning, the property that's proposed for the new West Grey Police Building requires a zoning bylaw amendment. There is actually a public meeting scheduled for April 21st for that purpose. However, it appears it may have to be postponed because the COVID situation, and apparently the new emergency legislation the province passed to facilitate council and committee meetings by electronics purposes doesn't relate to the Planning Act. So it appears that public meeting will have to be postponed. Also, because of the COVID situation, the local planning appeal tribunal that takes any appeals of planning applications such as a zoning bylaw amendment, that is basically shut down. So there is right now an indefinite extension of any appeal periods. So at this time, basically any public meetings will be postponed. However, late last week, we did hear from the province that they are considering or looking to implement amending legislation within the next couple of weeks that would permit public meetings for planning applications to go ahead. So we're looking forward to that amending legislation be passed, and then we'll have to send out notice of another public meeting, most likely for the police building zoning bylaw amendment.
And I'll be having a conversation with MPP Bill Walker with regard to this. So proceed, Councillor Hamilton.
Great, thank you, Madam Mayor. And just to clarify, it wasn't a question of whether this is a priority or a must. Absolutely, the project is a must. It was just clarifying the timeline and given, yes, given just the awareness that our planning is tied up right now in the crisis. Also availability of work crews and that kind of thing. So just checking in with timeline and if this is on timeline for moving forward in 2021. So thank you for that information.
Yep, we're moving ahead, and thank you very much. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just checking in with, as some other councillors have been doing, about things that must happen this year and things that could be delayed by a year. The pickup truck in Glenelg, if we were to delay purchasing that by a year, how significant would that be for public works staff?
Director Shurinsky, please.
Good morning again, and through your worship. Right now, that specific truck is the only one that we have that doesn't have the power lift gate on the back of it. It's a health and safety device, a lifting device that needs to be implemented, and that's the significance of that particular unit. So there's a lot of times where staff are deployed by themselves to get large items and retrieve large items and so forth off the road, and it's a way to do more with less. And that's the significance of that vehicle. If you choose to push it off, then I guess I would be back next year with the same item. And that's not something that I could sort of, what's the word, find a different way or sort of do without. So hopefully I've answered your question there.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Director Sawinski. Absolutely. So it sounds like something that would be a positive asset for this year, but it is possible to delay it by a year. So perhaps that could go on our list of possibilities as we're working through our list of must-haves and list of things that could be delayed, recognizing that we would have to pick that up in the taxes next year.
And just so you know, our Director of Finance and Treasurer is noting that as well. So
thank you.
Put that as a potential reduction. Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just a question to staff then. Is it possible to screen share that ongoing list that were our possible list, like to share that Excel spreadsheet so we could all see? Is that something staff could do on the screen?
Well, I'm going to ask again, give us one moment to see if that is a possibility. But as they're consulting with each other, is there anything further you would like to comment?
Sure. So just looking, I know at Elmwood, we had an additional capital ask this year, looking to replace the windows that are very old, they're sealed shut, and also looking at additional funding for technology that would improve the experience of people having conferences and events. I'd suggest that that the technology for events is something that could be deferred for next year. It's not a big savings, but I think it might be about $3,500, but perhaps our Director Mighton could confirm that.
Yeah, and I think that's really great that you're bringing that forward, Councillor. Director Mighton, comment? And by the way, thank you for the screen. What? This is, oh, sorry. I know you multitask. So this is in regards to the amount in reserve for the Elmwood Joint Community Center. Councillor Hamilton, you know what, Councillor Hamilton, if you want to talk further on it, but this is in regards to the reserve for the windows and some technology for conferencing. Councillor Hamilton, did I recap correctly, or would you like to add to that?
Oh, sure. Just that the Elmwood board had asked for additional capital funding, more than usual. Some was for window replacement and some was for technology for conferences, that kind of thing. I was just suggesting that the windows they're more of a must. They've been sealed shut. They're very old. We're going to find efficiencies by replacing those windows. However, the technology equipment, that sounds more like a nice to have, and I could see us deferring that to next year. That would be a suggestion. I think it's about $3,500 savings, but
Director Wrighton, at your convenience, could you respond?
Yeah, we had added a total of 6,500 for the IT and the Windows. I don't have just what the split was, but it was almost kind of a 50-50. So it's probably around that 3,000 to 3,500. But that's what we had added, a total of 6,500 to the original capital request.
okay.
Anything further?
So we had a.
Sorry, I was going to say that sounded like perfect pitch, by the way. But please proceed.
Here we go. So just looking at new initiatives this year, another new initiative was enhancing our youth engagement. And so given that it's difficult for us to be congregating, and we just know a lot of programs have been are impacted by COVID, just checking in about youth engagement, I think we had left it in about 2,500. Is that something that could be postponed for next year? Perhaps we could have youth engagement online and have more of a free way of engaging youth, but perhaps that'd be a question for our recreation supervisor. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and I would absolutely agree. I know this is something that's really important, and our youth engagement and building up to a youth summit perhaps in 2021. But given our current environment, the planning that potentially could be done by Supervisor Hewlett within the office and not extending out to the community, our youth community, I think has value in addressing that. So that's from my comment, because I'm very much wanting the initiative, but I see the need to adapt differently this year in order to have that success. Supervisor Hewlett, comment, please.
If I may, I believe it was put forward by CAO Johnson that we would postpone the youth engagement. As much as I wish it was in the cards for this year, I think given the ongoing circumstances, I don't believe that we will be able to do the project to the intent that we had originally planned. So I will look at what sort of options we have doing it virtually, or if it's just worth kind of postponing into the next year.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton?
Very good, thank you. So I believe that was about $2,500, but yeah, we'll leave that with Mighton. And then just want to check in about another enhancement this year was increased summer camp programming, and that was I think just the way the school calendar and the summer calendar were aligning. We're going to have an extra week or two of summer camp possibility. Now I know it's too early to know exactly how summer camps are moving forward, if at all, but given that this was increased enhancement, I would suggest that we pull back the enhancement piece at this time. And I believe that was around $4,500.
Supervisor Hewlett, any comment? And then I'd also be looking to Madam CAO, so be prepared.
And if I may, Councillor Hamilton, you pretty much hit the nail on the head. That was with how the school calendar and the summer calendar all lined up. That was just to kind of extend the summer camp season so that it did hit the full time while students were out of school. I would caution against, however, removing that just in the event that we are able to run summer camps, just because that will leave kind of a lag between, we won't be able to offer summer care for the students while they are out of school if we are able to run the summer camps.
Thank you. Madam CAO, please, once your mic is unmuted. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor, for the question. These are parts of the things that we had looked at when we were considering lower revenues and, the other side of the ledger sheet, what are some of the savings that we can do internally. And absolutely, I know part of our summer camp is not going to occur. I mean, you know, I don't want to be pessimistic. That's not my nature, but I do honestly believe that we will still be able to provide some programming. And I know that our recreation supervisor is already working with his Parks and Rec team, across Bruce Grey County, in fact, on different program development. $4,500, perhaps we can absolutely take some of that away. We will have to remember that next year it's going, all of these decisions today, as we know, will come back for conversations next year. But as we're trimming, I can concede that some of that could be dialed back for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Further, Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you for that. And then sustainability and dark skies, not on this list. It was in their report. And so I would just like to acknowledge that a lot of those programs that were put forward were about engaging the community and involving the community, which is very difficult to do at this time. So I do support that quite a few of those programs won't move forward. And so support that it makes sense that that budget not be in place in full. I do think, though, the one project, the film plastic recycling at an estimated $5,000, that's a project that could be very useful at this time, as we're using a lot more single-use plastics right now, the way stores are handling purchases and that kind of thing. It's something that would benefit our community. And as was mentioned, as we talked about it earlier in the year, it'd be just copying what Brockton's doing and has done quite successfully. So I would support removing that funding, but leaving some funding in place for film plastics. That's my opinion about that.
Very good.
I'm supportive about the library, that adding staff at this time. Again, where our libraries aren't open, so that seems like something that we could postpone as well. I do want to check in about our flowers downtown this year. Is that a must-have? And also just checking in, because I know we're heavily dependent on our volunteers to plant them, and our staff, I understand, would water them. But could we just have a response from the CEO about how our downtown beautification is impacted by COVID at this time?
Yes, you can have that response right now. We are unmuting CAO Johnson's mic. Proceed, CAO Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor, for the question. I know that the beautification budget has already been reduced by $5,000, leaving approximately $20,000. There's two sides to that conversation, Councillor. I mean, I believe that the municipality has responsibility to be a bit of an economic driver, and you know, the flower program does that. Absolutely, we source locally. We you know, we've achieved a common, consistent program that is greatly reduced from the way that we used to do beautification, and I think it's going to make a big difference in our community. We can look at perhaps dialing it back. I mean, we had a beautiful program last year with hanging baskets and bridge baskets. You know, we're all making decisions about living within our means, so we could absolutely look at dialing that back. Volunteers typically have been taking care of those flowers with staff watering them. This year, with technically all of our parks are closed, and that includes our entry gardens, so that would be falling to staff to manage the weeding and the beautification of the continued beautification of those. So I would request that council give some thought to perhaps reducing that budget a bit further, but respectfully, let's keep something in there, because I think it's going to help the local economy, and you know, it'll give that as corny as it may sound, a little bit of hope, and once we get through this pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Councillor, thank you, CAO Johnson. Councillor Hamilton, do you have a dollar figure in mind?
Actually, I was going to ping pong that back to CEO and just see the sheet, acknowledging that there's we could move forward with just using slightly less. Did you have a dollar amount in mind?
CAO Johnson, could you please provide a concrete number? We're asking for it.
Sure. Thank you. And I would propose, we had a budget of $25,000. I would propose we cut that in half and we reduce it down to $12,500.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hamilton, anything further?
Thank you, CEO Johnston. And maybe not a discussion for today, but there might be other ways to beautify downtown. And just as one example, the in Owen Sound, they have an art banner project that's very engaging of the community and doesn't require watering throughout the summer. So just another idea to throw out there.
Well, just on that point, I think there might be some ideas that we can address at a future meeting. So
okay,
good on you for that suggestion. Anyway,
Thank
you still have the mic. Yep.
Okay, I think I'll just one more question, and this actually doesn't affect our levy, but I've been thinking about our water users and the rates that they pay, and just wanted to check in with Director Mighton. And on the capital side for water, and again, this isn't here levy, but our water users would be paying this, and I'm concerned about. I guess my first question is, how much are those rates going up in Durham and Newstead? And then my second question would be, because I don't know a lot about water, but in Durham Water, we're doing 225 radio frequency meters. Is that a must-have? Is that something that must happen this year? Is that something that could be delayed?
Director Mighton and probably Director Shrinsky. Okay, we'll go with Director Shrinsky first, please. Please go ahead, Director Shrinsky.
Certainly. The remote water meters this year is a continuing program from the previous year. It's something that it's a technology that allows us to read water meters remotely and not have to have staff go around and essentially tap the side of the house and or get those water meter readings. So I think it's essential to move forward with that project, as it will help reduce the man hours in the future of and time of collecting that information, which is vital to our to funding our water infrastructure and so forth. So so I'm not really certain. I would highly recommend that we do not. I would like to see that project continue for this year, and I highly recommend that we do not cancel it.
Yes.
Okay. Anything further, Councillor Hamilton?
Thank you for that response from someone who is on well water. And I'm also hearing, like, I think sometimes staff would have to go into homes and that kind of thing. And during this time of COVID, certainly that's not what we want to be doing. So that makes sense. Could we just also get a sense of the impact on the increase for our water rate users, generally speaking?
Oh, yes. Director Mighton is on deck to have that response, but I just wanted to know if there was anything further. So let's
thank you.
toss it over to Director Mighton at this point. You're welcome.
Yeah, so we need to finish looking and analyzing some of those water rates, but we're hoping to phase in any increase, whether it's 2.5% for the next few years, or depending on what level we need to get at. But we have to finish that analysis to bring back to council for approval.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So that's a separate process from the budget today. Okay, thank you for all this time on the mic. I think I will pass the mic back to you, Madam Mayor.
Well, thank you very much and appreciate all of your comments and questions. Before I go on to, we do have a bit of a list. Director Mighton, could you provide us with a recap? And then just on deck will be Councillor Herkert, Deputy Mayor Hutchinson, and then Councillor Shea. Director Mighton, that recap, please.
So we've got deferring the Glenelg, sort of picking up where we last were with the reserves. The next is the deferring the Glenelg pickup truck, 29,500. Removing or deferring the youth engagement, 2,500. I got the sense we left the camp enhancements in, the sustainability in dark sky, only keeping the film plastics, so that would be reducing by 8,600. Elmwood Community Center, the total for the windows was estimated to be 12,000, the IT 7,000, so removing our share of that would be a reduction of 3,500 for the removing the IT part. And the flowers, we had already removed 5,000 before, so to take it down to the 12,500 in total, it would be a $7,500 reduction. So that gets us to 178,900. We're at 468,976 in total, or 4.8%.
Excellent. Say that again. Sorry, I
We're at
need it
4.8%.
emphasized. 4.8. Yeah, I just wanted it emphasized. Thank you very much. Okay. Councillor Hergert, please.
So I have two items. These two items are coming from reserves as money to be spent for this year.
Director Mike, sorry, not Director Mike, Councillor Hergert, just a reminder, talk directly into the mic, please.
Yes, so the two items that I have that are projects with revenues coming out of reserves, but I think we should just hold on and we should wait and see, like we could have that money in reserve 6 months from now, would be the Durham Arena steps, the outdoor steps, as well as the household hazardous waste. The household hazardous waste program has been on the last 3 years of budgets, hasn't been done. Southgate has a good program. We haven't quite checked into, maybe our new director is into that, but we have not been able to get this program up and going, the household hazardous waste, for 3 years. So I need to see a plan on that before we would go ahead. The $41,000 has been sitting in reserves for several years. I think it should just sit in a reserve this year for some unexpected we don't know about. As for the Durham Arena steps, those are, you know, this year.
Councillor Hergert,
Yes.
you have lost your audio.
Can you hear me now?
Nope.
Hello?
Try it again, please.
Hello?
Yes, that's working.
Okay, so the Durham Arena steps are the outdoor steps. We're not having the fair this fall. We maybe won't be doing a July 1st event. We're not sure. I think that is another one where we were going to be pulling from reserves. It doesn't help our levy, but I think we should keep the money in reserve for the unknown that could be coming. So that was the Durham Arena steps, and then the household hazardous waste, like I mentioned, has been on the budget list for 3 years, and we have not been able to get that one done yet. So I don't think this is the year to do it. I'm very happy that Councillor Hamilton broached the idea of the police building. Not to say that it's not a priority, just what would the expenses be this year? So right now it is listed in the budget. The entire police building is listed in the budget as a $6.2 million, oh, pardon me. I have total finance and personnel. That's what I was looking at. So $6 million that we would be looking to spend $295,000 from reserves and $110,000 in development charge reserve. I think this is not the year to kick off a $4 to $6 million project. I think that we need to have a lot of community input. I was happy that Councillor Hamilton brought up timeline. I'm not sure how much would have to be done, how much would have to be spent this year. This is, if it's in the budget today, it's absolutely up for financing throughout the year. But I do not believe that this is the year to commence a project of this magnitude.
Well, I can tell you, Councillor, this is absolutely the year. We have committed to our community and to our West Grey Police. This is a project that has been years in the making, and we now have a commitment to it. So it definitely is the year that we need to move ahead with it. We've got that commitment. I wonder, Director Mighton, can you just provide the dollar figure with regard to this? Please, thank you.
Yep. So yeah, we've got just estimated 6 million. We don't know till we get into the RFP and the plans and the design. But we've got 75,000 coming from the tax levy, and we had put some into reserves over the years, and then using some development charges reserve. So we're looking at the majority of whatever the final cost would be. At a $6 million build, just over the 5.5 million would be borrowed and debentured over a certain time frame, which again, we'd look into once we know the total costs and what borrowing time frames, but it would be a long-term borrowing situation on there.
So the amount for this year?
Yeah, so the tax levy impact this year is 75,000. We'll definitely need to increase that in future years, as was explained earlier in the budget process, to incorporate the payback for the annual paybacks for the loan. So that 75,000 wouldn't be sufficient for an annual payback, but it is maintained in there, which is what we had the last year as well.
Thank you, Director Martin.
So at this present moment, the public meeting is on hold. We don't know how long this will stay in place for. I don't believe that I have seen that was part of that Appendix A of information that our CAO would be bringing forward, the police station RFP. And so at that rate, I see, you know, we're already in April. We don't have that idea of what all will be included in the police station. I know there's a lot of desire in our community to not just have it be a police station, to have it be a community center that is going to be $4 to $6 million. And so I'm not sure in April of a year where we really are having a challenging budget year, that this is the time to proceed on $4 to $6 million of new assets. This is not the asset deficit that we're talking about in bridges and roads. So we have to maintain that old assets would be our responsibility under sustainability, sustaining and stewardship of what we already have, not creating more with, you know, the risk that we have is the risk of bridges and bridges mainly failing. And so
this is 75,000 this year in the budget. It is responsible. We have to ensure that our community is safe and our West Grey police officers are safe. We have committed this to move forward on this project, and I think it is responsible to continue on this project. Councillor Hergert, anything further?
Respectfully, I will disagree. No, that is it. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Hutchinson, please. Deputy Mayor Hutchinson, your mic is unmuted now.
Thank you, Mayor Robinson. I was wondering if we could have a couple-minute recess before we continue to discuss this discussion.
All right, we could take a 5-minute break, and we will come back in 5 minutes. Thank you very
Mayor
much,
Robinson.
everyone.
And I would be looking to be speak when I come back.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We are on break. Hello, everyone. I just need to repeat that because we are now being recorded. I would like to get started in a minute, but I want to acknowledge that all members of council are present. Supervisor Hewlett, do we have all members of council present at this point? Good. Based on our login on my dashboard, we've got all members of council present, so we will call the meeting back to order. I think the break was really timely, quite frankly. All right, now we'll start with Deputy Mayor Tom Hutchinson. We'll have your mic unmuted. Please proceed, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Robinson. It's Deputy Mayor Hutchinson. I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, please proceed. That's very clear on your voice.
Thank you. Couple of things that I just want to discuss. First off, I just want to make sure that my clarity is I'm very dedicated to staying focused and completing this and moving forward on, if you will, the new police station. The design of this new police station, which we've all discussed, would actually allow for future development when we're looking at fire and EMS. It was kind of what we were focusing on. So that is a future-ready project. The police station is a must for the safety of our police officers. It's something that's been in the works for many years, and it's before us. We've gone ahead. We've acquired the land. We need to keep going on this. I know COVID's here, and we've got some different things going on, but this is it's an asset that needs to take place. So I am going to support that 100% without fail. Couple of things. The report that came out was page 6 that we got showed that there was 3 initiatives that the staff put forward under item number 3, and that was to cancel the 275 bridge. The library, which was actually 11.4, we've changed that to 25,000 now, and the sustainability committee took us to 3.5. And to me, that was a good start point, and we got these other things we've added to it, and that's fine. But I think that to me is where I was looking at starting. Now, if we look at the can you hear me okay, Mayor Robinson?
Yes, please proceed.
Okay. Okay, so I'm at 25 grand on the library. I'm just looking at the sheet here. Now, what Councillor Hutchinson said is anything we can do, but we should proceed, and I agree with that. And I think deferring the painting on the Newstead Hall, that is an asset, and it is in need. So I question whether that project should be put on the back burner or not. Another thing that has come to my mind, and this is a question for our Director of Infrastructure, is if we deferred this new pickup truck, I would like to know what is on the list for next year on our replacement schedule. Do we have more items there or vehicles that are on the list for next year?
So let's go to Director Sherinsky and then to Director Mighton. Director Sherinsky, please.
What I can do is I do believe I have another pickup truck that is on the list for next year. But what I can do is I'll bring those numbers up, and if it is the will of council, I can report back with a more accurate assessment of what I have on deck for next year. Would that be okay?
Deputy Mayor, is that online with what you're looking for?
Yes and no. I'm here to make a decision on this budget today and not defer this for another meeting. So
I'm talking with all due respect, your worship members of council, 5 minutes, just so I can just look it up and respond within 5 minutes. Would that be acceptable? Is that acceptable?
Yeah, yes. That's more than acceptable. I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Proceed, Deputy Mayor.
So the Newstead Hall is one thing that we did discuss, and again, that was because it is an asset and it is a maintenance project. So something that I'd like to discuss in further detail when we get back to what we're putting in or taking out. I agree with the council chairs. I have no issue with that at all. The 8 sidewalks. This is a project that was supposed to be completed last year and did not get completed. And if we're going to roll this for the safety of the students that are going to that school, I'm not going to support that at all. This is something it was actually discussed last year to be completed. It was a project that was rolled. So I don't see prolonging that or pushing that off another year. Again, we have the safety of the students, and we all know that is something that we have to deal with up here. The grants organizations, I'm good with what's been discussed there. The Normanby Arena parking lot is another problem. There's 3 entrances going into that arena, and we are not allowed those 3. It's right on the Grey Road County 3. There's two with the pillars, and then this is a 3rd entrance. So I believe that that has to be addressed, whether there's barriers put up, whether we don't have to pave it, but we do need to put the barriers up. That's something that has to be done, and that was recommended right from the county down. So I think we got to look at that one. I'm good with some of the reserves on the playgrounds. I'm good with that. I don't know what the impact of the municipal dam reserve is that something, are we compounding a big problem if we got an issue with it next year? I don't know enough about the dam to speak to that. So I'm a little cautious on not putting something aside for future dam repairs or whatever the case is. New hall. The new hall reserve, the roof, if the roof doesn't need to be done at this time, I'm good with that right now, youth engagement. So those are some of the areas that I was looking at that I don't know if we can really delete. As far as looking at the new housing and whatnot, I'm a positive minded. I think we're going to find that our community is probably going to thrive. You're going to find a lot of the people in the city that are struggling, making their ends meet down there, if you will, are probably going to be looking and migrating this way because we do have more affordable homes. Our taxes are less. And I think the wave of the future is what we're all experiencing now. We're all working from home. So I think you're going to see that the migration is actually going to happen once the subdivisions get going. So I think we're probably going to stay pretty much on course. We have some very good marketable subdivisions that are available. Well, we have one right now and possibly another one coming up in Newstead. So I don't think that the housing market's, yes, it's going to be a little slowdown, but with the interest rates lower, you're going to see some activity going on there. So what else did I have here? So what I would like to do, Mayor Robinson, is I would like to just go back to, again, page 6. I was looking at item 3 when we just did the 275 bridge, the 11-4 library, again, which was, we changed to 25, and the sustainability, and then add in some of these other items. And I would like to know if I could ask Director Mike what that would look like. Because on the report, it suggested we would be down to 3.5% with those 3 recommendations from staff.
Director Mighton, are you prepared to respond?
Yep. So you're looking, the scenario that was presented as an option with those 3 items would have got us down to 3.5%.
Yes.
Tax levy increase. Yep. So that would be, what do we got here? About $14.77 per 100,000 of residential assessment if their assessment is increasing.
Right.
An average of 3.2. So that's what that scenario would have got us down to there. It was 300 and let me just pull it up. That was 345,376 is what that would have got our tax levy down to, or 3.5%.
Right. Now, if you added in these other items, Director Mighton, I see the ones that they're in blue on my screen, the ones that I kind of just discussed, and we are waiting for the response from the Director of Infrastructure regarding the pickup truck. But if we were to add up, minus those ones that I've just kind of open for discussion, what does that take us if you put that into the
adding those back in? So well, we've got,
well, if you add, yes, but yeah, okay, add them in, and then I would like to see the ones that were, you know, the ones that we want to take out, what that would do to the number.
So that would be, the items in blue are totaling 79.5. We've got 15, 10, 5, 20, and 29.5. The sustainability has been, it still has 5,000 in there for the film plastics.
Right, but you've increased the library from 11.4.
Yes, and the library is an additional, yeah. So I was trying to just going through. Yeah, so you're wanting to bring the library back up?
No. Those are washed. I guess what I was looking at, if you take the library, just leave the library alone, if you will, right now, because that's going to wash with the film. And then just add up the chairs, the grants organization, and a few of the other ones.
So all those other reserve transfers, that gets us to 99,400.
So what does that actually, and then put that onto that recommendations that staff brought forward, again, under item 3. What does that take?
Basically that would be taking the full 275 out of the bridge reserve?
Yes.
So that gets us down to 2.8 or 200 and the reduction that you would make would be 374,000 for a tax levy of 273,000, or down to 2.8% tax levy.
So we're under 3 by still achieving a few of these projects, and well, I'm not going to say mandatory, but the sidewalks is, again, it's we need to perform here because there's safety of the community with that one. But so we're under 3 by just doing some of these other ones that we've identified, or the council has anyway. And
yeah, mostly the reserve transfers of those other ones.
Right.
And then the grants to organizations.
Right. And
those are the big changes. Yeah.
And then just the response from the Director of Infrastructure on the pickup truck. My concern is that next year we have 2 pickup trucks. I don't think that's a a good way for us to be going. I think we need to stay the course with that planning that we had. So if I could just wait for that response, then I
Okay,
would.
well, Deputy Mayor, if I might,
Yeah.
I do notice that our Director of Infrastructure and Public Works has his hand raised. Perhaps we'll get that response now, and then I will come back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Sherinsky, please.
Yes, I have my response here. So essentially, the question was, what do we have on deck for 2021? And essentially, according to our fleet replacement schedule, in 2021, I have a 1-ton truck that's due for replacement, and that's a 1-ton with the dump box on the back. We do our cold patching and cold mix work to stay in compliance with our minimum maintenance standards. And also we have a tandem plow truck that's up for replacement. Also we have a single axle that's up for replacement. And that's what I have on deck for 2021. I'm just noticing here on my sheet that we've got a chipper in here, I believe, that needs to be replaced as well, a Vermeer, and it's slated for 2021 as well. We use that for a lot of the woodwork that we do alongside of the road, again, to maintain our minimum maintenance standards. Also, I just wanted to take the opportunity to let council know that we also have a pickup truck that we are driving that is giving us engine problems right now. So it's rather undetermined on how long it would last. If we did replace the pickup truck that we had planned to do this year, it would enable me to recycle the supervisor's truck and replace the one that's giving us issues, keeping our fleet rolling. And so I thought I would add that information as requested.
Thank you very much, Director Sherinsky. Before I go back to Deputy Mayor, there was also a comment about at the Ayton Arena, rather not doing that full project, was there a way to put blocks up, or, I defer to you on that operational component. Can you respond to that? And if needed, I can have the deputy rephrase that question. In fact, that's what I'll do. Deputy Mayor, your question about the Ayton Arena parking lot, can you rephrase the question for Director Sherinsky, please?
Absolutely. When you go into the arena coming into town there's one big wide open entrance that is supposed to be, it's actually supposed to be blocked off. There is 2 other entrances, and this actually creates a 3rd entrance. So okay. My question is, if we do not pave it, that little front portion there, and we just put the barriers up across the front to close that off.
Yeah.
How much savings is that, like the barriers there, versus paving and barriers, if you will?
So in other words, we would just to discuss for further clarification, you would want to put in a concrete barrier where there was a previous entrance. Barrier curb, that is. Guardrail
or whatever you're going to be putting in there. I don't know that. I just like, to me, we would close. To me, did the arena parking lot last year, and that little patch in the front was not done. And to me, we would finish paving that, close the books on it, put up a barrier. That's done. That's completed. I think it's not a big job. That could be done this year, and we can move on. There's no sense in my mind just leaving a little patch of gravel there and putting a barrier up. I'd rather see it's a completed project.
I concur.
Thank you. Before I go back to you, Deputy Mayor, Madam CAO has her hand up. Let's unmute her mic, please. Please proceed, Madam CAO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I agree with the deputy that we do not need to pave that 3rd entrance. We have a number of cement planters that are down at the Durham Depot that could actually be moved over there, and it would be at next to no cost. So, and that would solve the issue of that 3rd entrance that isn't permitted. So I'd like to leave that 5,000 in the list of projects that we are taking away, because there are options to make sure that we've got that closure and then the project is finished. Thank you.
Thank you. And just from the chair, I am noting the time. Councillor, or rather, Deputy Mayor Hutchinson, you still have the mic.
Thank you, Mayor Robinson. So if I could go back to Director Might, and I just for clarity, so we've taken out the 275, we've adjusted the library, we've done the sustainability with the film, we've added back in these items that I've kind of identified. That takes us down to 2.75. I'm reading on my screen. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Well, I would like to make a motion that recommend that this is where we would go with this year's budget.
Clerk Turner, is the motion in order at the point if I get a seconder? Please speak into the mic.
I can give you, like, use that 268 for your dollar amount that tax levy
Yes, the
increase.
motion would be in order. If there's a seconder, certainly there are other hands raised, but it is in order.
If there is a seconder for this motion, could you please indicate with a check mark yes? All right, I am not seeing a seconder. Okay, yes, I am. I am seeing a seconder. Could you please open Councillor Hutchinson's mic? Councillor Hutchinson, are you seconding this motion?
Well, I am, but I would like to make some adjustments to it. But I like the idea of what Councillor or Deputy Mayor is suggesting. But I can comment more, but if you'd like this time.
Yes, I think if you want, if it's a friendly amendment on this and the Deputy Mayor is okay with that. Clerk Turner, would that be in order?
Well, certainly if you wish to second the motion the way it stands, and it's in order. However, if you do want to continue some discussions of possible amendments, it might be the best situation to refrain from seconding it if it's going to be potentially amended anyway, to allow that further discussion, but that is up to you, Councillor Hutchison.
Okay, so on that suggestion, I'll take away my second for the moment, but okay. I do believe that I think we're going in the right direction. I was a little disappointed when I look at all the things that we're removing. My concern is I don't want to shut West Grey down any more than it's shut down already. We do have things going on, and when this thing's all said and done, we are going to move forward. People will be looking to West Grey to do some things, to spend some money. I'm thinking of flowers, particular. We're using some of our local businesses to put flowers out there. So I want us to be ready to move forward. The paving, the painting, things like some of those jobs that we have on the books, I would like to see us continue on with them. So when the time is right, and but as far as putting money into reserve, fine. You know, we don't put the money into reserve. That's good. Given that when we do down the line, we are going to have to put that money back into reserve, and we're going to have to go ahead with those projects, whatever. But my thoughts are let's continue on with some of the projects that we have in the books. Not put the money into reserves as we suggested on the page here, but maybe use some of the money in reserve that you're talking for the bridge, bring that amount down. So I understand where people are coming from. We need to put money into bridge reserve, but again, as I said before, we're putting money into something that I don't think is going to happen this year, maybe next year, maybe down the road, whatever. But we need to get our budget down and move forward at this point. But again, be ready to move forward when this thing all gets lifted. So
okay,
that's I would like to see us amend that motion.
All right, so what I'm looking for now procedurally is there anyone else that will move the motion, second the motion as moved by Deputy Mayor Hutchinson? I want to look at that first. So if there is somebody that will second the motion, and Councillor Hutchinson, if you could remove your check mark unless you've reconsidered the opportunity to second it, but I'm just looking for a seconder to Deputy Mayor Hutchinson's motion. All right, I'm not seeing anyone at this point. So Deputy Mayor, there was not a seconder to your particular motion. I just want to ensure that you're finished because I want to go to Councillor Shea and then just finish off if Councillor Hutchinson had anything and then Councillor Townsend. Deputy Mayor, anything further at this point?
Well, I'd just like to follow up, if I may, Mayor Robinson. Councillor Hutchinson actually didn't make a whole lot of changes to what my motion was. So I'm curious. It almost complimented what I was saying. There's not a lot of changes there. Could I get some clarity on that, please?
I'm going to ask for clarity from our clerk. I just drew his attention to this. Clerk Turner, a response procedurally, please.
So my understanding, and perhaps Councillor Hutchison should clarify that, but it certainly did get into questions about whether or not all these projects should be actually taken off the table because of the fear of shutting down the municipality in terms of not proceeding with projects, unless I misunderstood Councillor Hutchison.
So Councillor Hutchinson, for clarity, please.
Yeah, that's correct. I would like to see us go ahead with some of the projects that are highlighted with the blue. And my thoughts were, if we were to take 75,000 out of the bridge reserve, so leave it at 200, and given the changes that Director Mighton has made there, where does that bring us? Like I'm thinking, even if we can get it under 5%, maybe we go with it, given that we still want to move ahead.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that. I do note that Councillor Shea has a comment, but Director Mighton, at one point we did have 4.8. So I wonder if you could respond to that. And then if you're complete, Councillor Hutchinson, I'd move on to Councillor Shea, if that's okay. Yep. I'll check with you.
That's good for now.
So adding back the items in blue, the painting, the sidewalks in Ayton, the dam reserve, and the Glenelg pickup truck, if I'm caught those correctly. So that would add back 74,500. And then I believe Councillor Hutchinson said to leave the bridge reserve at 200,000. So reducing it by 75,000. So we're back to 4.8% or 468,476, if I understood those changes correctly.
So Councillor Hutchinson, anything further? Do you wish to do anything further with this?
No, that's sort of where I'm thinking. I'm not sure about that municipal dam reserve. Maybe someone could clarify what that's really for.
Okay, I'm going to go to Director Sherwinski, please.
Yes, through your worship, that $20,000 was to set aside half the amount. There's a study on the dams that the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority is applying for funding for, and I believe the estimate was somewhere in the vicinity of $40,000, and that's what the $20,000 is there for, so that if we're successful with the study, that we would have to pay, we would have to come up with our half, and that's what the $20,000 is for. So that if we are successful, that it would be held in reserve, and then that way we could pay for our portion of the study with respect to the structural integrity of the dams.
Okay, so my suggestion would we take that out for now, and if that comes to fruition, that maybe we can find 20,000 somewhere. My thoughts are that down the road, I think given the situation with the government and the amount of money they're putting out, there's going to be a lot of changes in the grants coming down to municipals level. So I think there's going to be a number of things that are going to get cut here, which we don't know about yet. So my suggestion was take that out for now.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shea, then Councillor Townsend. Please unmute Councillor Shea, please.
Yes, it's Councillor Shea. So I have a couple of things. Just a point, jumping back several discussions around police and the RFP. The Deputy Mayor mentioned that that project is going to include fire and or EMS. I don't think that was actually ever determined.
You're
And-
quite right. You're quite
Okay.
right, Councillor, that we're, that certainly is, you know, if we ever, for future ready, but it is not including, and you are correct.
And I believe that council was going to review the items and terms and parameters that were going to go into the RFP before the RFP is drafted.
That's correct,
So-
Councillor. We would be bringing that to, or staff will be bringing that to a committee of the whole for all members of council to
Great.
review. Yep,
I just want to make sure we're all on the same page there.
we are.
So this chart that the Director of Finance has prepared for us is great. We seem to be getting down to brass tacks. I think what we should do is, my thinking was that we had come into here with like cutting the bridge reserve and looking at a 3.5% tax increase, which was much more palatable to the general public. And I think that in this current situation of reductions and constrictions, the 3.5 is the target that we should be looking at. And I think what we need to do is, I think we're going to have to reduce the bridge reserve, but I think we want to reduce it as little as possible. And all of these other items are allowing us to leave as much in the bridge reserve as we can. So anything that I think we indicate as blue here and that we subtract from this list, we are then deducting that money out of the bridge reserve. So I don't think that I think the bridge reserve or you know, supporting our bridge infrastructure is more of a priority than painting a hall. So I would like to see the hall put back in. I think the pickup truck, I hate the idea that we're abandoning our commitments to an asset management plan, but I do think these are exceptional times. So I would like to see that also put back in. I will concede that in the spirit of compromise with the deputy mayor, I would concede that sidewalks in Ayton, you know, that you know, if there's tripping hazards or that maybe that should go ahead. So I'm prepared to leave that in. And then I think we should do whatever we need to do to the remainder of the bridge reserve to get that number down to 3.5. So that's going to be reduce the bridge reserve by some magic number.
Okay, so first of all, before we go any further, I'm going to ask Deputy Mayor just to respond, because I think I'm just anticipating that he's just going to provide a clarity point to, and then I'm going to Director Mighton for the financial part, and then back to you, Councillor Shea. Okay. So Deputy Mayor, your mic is open for a clarity point.
Thank you, Mayor Robinson. Yeah, I did not say that we were including fire and EMS. I said
okay.
we discussed that we would be future ready, and the potential of the design when we did that would be where we could possibly expand. That's what I was talking about, not that we're moving fire and EMS. Thank you.
Thank you. No, good for clarity. That's just fine. Thank you very much. Director Mighton on Councillor Shea's points, and then I am going to go back to Councillor Shea. We're waiting for her mic. Yes, thank you.
So then that would just be adding back in the Ayton sidewalks only. And those are new sidewalks. I believe, Vance can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there is not existing sidewalks going to the school in Ayton on this stretch of road.
That's right.
I think. So this would be a new sidewalk. Just when we were talking about a trip hazard, this is a new section of sidewalk. And then that would reduce the bridge reserve by 135,000, leaving 140,000 going into the bridge reserve. That would get us to 3.52 or 343,000 and change for a tax levy increase.
Thank you. Councillor Shea, you still have the mic.
Yeah, so I would like to move that we adopt this version.
Okay, is there a seconder for this? I'm looking for a check mark, please. And I see Councillor Hamilton. Thank you. I'm going to open Councillor Hamilton's mic. Councillor Hamilton, are you seconding this motion?
I believe so. Could Director Mighton just shrink the screen a little bit? I'm not seeing. Oh, never mind. That was an error on my part, perhaps. Thank you. Yes. So as Councillor Hamilton, I will second this motion.
Okay, could I just have the motion read again by either the clerk or the Director of Finance and Treasurer? Take your pick, staff. Director Mighton. Or
Yep, okay. That the 2020 budget be recommended for approval with a tax levy increase 343,976 or 3.5%.
so I'm going to go Councillor Shea. How's the motion?
Councillor Shea, yes, that seems right.
And you're moving it.
Yes.
Councillor Hamilton, are you seconding this motion?
Councillor Hamilton, and I second the motion.
Thank you. I'm looking for questions, comments, and I'm going to go with Councillor Townsend, then Councillor Hutchinson. Unless Councillor Shea, is your hand up?
No, I put my hand down.
Thank you very much. Councillor Townsend first, then Councillor Hutchinson. Your mic is open, Councillor Townsend.
Yes, Councillor Townsend, I hate to throw a wrinkle into this, but the one thing missing in the report, the summary, is the fact that we have an $80,000 to $90,000 shortfall in revenue because we are, or we voted to waive the tax interest penalties, and that does not show.
Well, that certainly is a motion that that was passed last time. Director Mighton, could you provide comment, please?
So we were hoping that we might be able to manage. We budget conservatively on some of the penalty and interest, so be a bit slight cushion there depending on the magnitude of it, and then some of those other areas that were discussed. Maybe there's a temporary short savings in fuel, a temporary savings on conferences not being attended. Some of those temporary operational items will help to offset that. We're hoping anyways would help to offset that lost revenue. And we're kind of wait and see what it all looks like. But that was our hope, was that some of the short-term savings within the operations would help to soften the blow of the lost revenue on temporary penalty waiving.
Thank you very much. Councillor Townsend, anything further?
Yes, I heard we hope it'll soften the blow, that it will offset some of the impact, but I didn't hear it will. And so I'm a little concerned that we're still allowing the expenses to overrun what we've recovered through the levy. So I'm really feeling that something should be in there to reflect the fact that we are going to lose it, unless staff can tell us that they will do what's necessary to offset it.
Director Mighton, anything further on that comment?
We will. We have. We can keep monitoring it and keep it close. If growth is stronger, great. If growth is worse, your whole budget it loses. Everything is an estimate.
We're doing our very best at this point, is what I'm hearing from you.
We're going to keep an eye on our cash flows. We're going to try to keep an eye on it, but till we know how it's all kind of rolling out. But we were fairly confident that we might be able to absorb it within some of those short-term savings, that we're not arbitrarily reducing the budget to capture those savings. But they will help to offset some of these waiving of penalty.
Thank you. Before I go back to you, Councillor Townsend, Madam CAO, please, and thank you, Director Mighton, for that response, by the way. CAO Johnson. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I appreciate the question, Councillor Townsend, and it is something that we are absolutely being mindful of, as our director has indicated. The estimate of the $60,000 to $90,000 is, our message is still, if you're able to pay your taxes, please do so. I mean, we have cash flows that we need to protect as well. So we're not saying that it's a guarantee that citizens aren't going to be paying their taxes. I think we have a very responsible community, and people understand the value that they're getting for their tax dollar. I think what council has developed here this morning shows this is a budget of action, and we are doing important work while we're still managing to put a little bit in reserve for future opportunities. The $90,000, we put that there as a heads up, but as our director said, we continually monitor where we're at. And as I had indicated earlier this morning, this situation changes day by day. And we will be reporting to council on a regular basis as the situation unfolds. I'm very thankful that we can meet by these virtual methods, because it helps us to continue business of the corporation and the work that the community is looking for us to do. So if I may, we will, I can make the commitment that we'll watch this, and if the flags get red, we will certainly be coming back with another conversation.
Thank you, CAO Johnson. Anything further, Councillor Townsend, on the motion?
The last one would be the council chairs. I'll put purchasing on notice again. When we know we're coming back, I definitely want a chair, and I'll pay for it if I have to. I can no longer sit in those chairs. It is so uncomfortable. I'd rather stand.
All right, so
that's
noted.
They're there. So if that's what it takes, that's what I'll do. But I will not continue to sit in those chairs.
Okay, thank you, so noted. Anything further before I go on?
It's fine.
Thank you. Councillor Hutchinson, please. We'll have your mic unmuted. Councillor Hutchinson, on the motion before us, please.
Here's a thought. You buy a chair and you put your name on it, be your legacy. But anyways, that's just a sidebar.
Very good.
Yeah, I can live with what we have here. My only caution I wonder about is the deferring the Gunnell pickup truck. The director listed off about 3 different vehicles that we're going to be looking at next year. And if we keep pushing them off and piling them up, we're going to run into problems there too. So that's my only concern. Maybe there's some way of doing some juggling with his trucks and whatnot, given that we have one that seems to be causing issues. So I'm not sure. I'll leave that out there, but I just wanted to caution that we don't want to do that too much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hergert, then Deputy Mayor, and then Councillor Townsend. This is to the motion. Councillor Hergert, please. Unmute her mic, please. Go ahead.
If I could ask our Director of Finance, the amount of money.
I'm sorry, Councillor Hergert, we cannot hear your audio at all.
So I'm hopeful to ask the Director of Finance how much money we spent on roads and bridges in 2019 and how much we propose to spend in 2020.
Okay, can you recap? We think we have the gist of what you're saying, but for clarity, could you talk right into the mic? Ask your question, please.
Carrie, would you be able to tell me how much money was spent on roads and bridges for 2019 and our final number that is proposed in this motion?
Thank you. Director Mighton is
Yeah,
just looking it up.
And I'll, yeah. Just give me a minute, I gotta find 2019.
Yeah, that's fine. So after Councillor Hergert will be Deputy Mayor Hutchinson, and I think that's it on the list so far. Thank you. Just we're needing Director Mighton to check into some information. It was roads and bridges, correct, Councillor Hergert?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Just as we hold, I would like to note that I do support the Deputy Mayor's comment about sidewalks in Ayton. That was a 2019 project. It did get deferred, so I am supportive of putting that back in.
Thank you for that comment. And that is correct. It was a budget approval from last year. Director Mighton, are you prepared? I'll be going to Deputy Mayor Hutchinson, and then I'm not seeing any other questions following Councillor Hergert's, and I'll be calling the question on the motion. That's just the... no, I'd like to stick with Councillor Hergert at this point so that Director Mighton is able to address it, and then we'll just stick to the order. But thank you, Supervisor Hewlett.
So 2019 roads and bridges, just over 1.3 million. 2020 roads and bridges, 1.447 million.
1.447 million.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Thanks.
Thank you. Anything further before I move on? No? Okay. That's a no, Councillor Hergert?
Actually, could I mention that the asset management, the Glenelg pickup truck, I think that is postponing something that we're just going to have to do more for purchasing assets next year. And that is one that I believe we should keep on there. We've just had an incident with a grader that needed work outside of what we thought it would. And this is the trouble we find ourselves in when we hold on to assets longer than their viable life. I'd like to see the Glenelg truck put back in so that we don't get off step of our asset management plan.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, you have the mic on the motion before us, please.
Thank you, Mayor Robinson. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I'm very happy that where we've arrived. I guess I'm still very concerned on the asset management, and I'll echo what Councillor Hutchinson and Councillor Hergert have said. I'm very concerned that we're going to be compounding a bigger problem next year for replacement of the equipment that we really need out in the community to keep the services going. I'd really like to see, or I'd like them to entertain at least thinking putting that pickup in and maybe taking that out of what was going into the bridge reserve and lower that down a little bit. There's still a little bit going in, and we can still achieve this the 3 and 3.5. That's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Hutchinson to the motion, and if you're finished speaking, could you please take your hands off from being raised? Councillor Hutchinson, please.
Yeah, I agree about the pickup truck, and I've already stated that. Even if we put it back in, I'd be interested to see what that brings us up to without changing the bridge bridge reserve. But the other thing I wanted to mention is that we have in there deferred ball diamond steps, no tax levy. We decided, I believe, that we would take that money out of the Mighton account, which was designated for parks. So that wasn't going to come out of reserve. It wasn't going to come out. It wasn't a tax levy hit. And I'd like to see us go ahead and get that done if we could. So just to make a note of that.
Okay. Anything further, Councillor Hutchinson?
No.
Okay. Councillor Hergert to the motion.
Yes, so just as Councillor Hutchison had brought up, we did decide to take it out of the reserve, the Mighton Trust, but I'm suggesting and I'm recommending that we actually leave the money in the reserve at this point. This project would take staff to do, right? We'd probably be using our own staff to do, but I still believe that to have some money in reserve is a good idea for this year. And so to that point, I would like that it still, that the project be held off until a different year.
All right, thank you. Nothing further?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to have the motion read, and then I'm going to call the question on the motion. Director Mike, could you please be so kind as to read the motion? Thank you.
Okay, so the motion does not include the pickup truck,
Right.
just so that everyone's clear, and it is deferring the steps. No tax levy impact, but it is deferring the steps. That's that list of changes that you see. The orange items were discussed there, but I have not made any change to that. So the motion is that the 2020 budget be recommended for approval with a tax levy increase of $343,976 or 3.5%.
So Councillor Shea, that is your motion. Please unmute Councillor Shea. Councillor Shea?
Councillor Shea, yes, that's the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton, you are seconding this motion?
Yes, Councillor Hamilton, I second the motion.
Thank you. Members of council, I am calling the vote on the motion. If you are in favor, please indicate with a check mark. If you are not in favor, indicate with an X. Okay, I will start the vote here. So I, Mayor Christine Robinson, am in favor of this motion. Councillor Hamilton, state your name and how you are voting.
Councillor Hamilton, I'm in favor of the motion.
Councillor Hutchinson, state your name and how you are voting.
Councillor Hutchison, no, I am not in favor.
Deputy Mayor, state your name and how you're voting.
Deputy Mayor Hutchinson, I am not in favor.
Councillor Shea, state your name and how you are voting.
Councillor Shea, I am in favor.
Councillor Hergert, state your name and how you're voting.
Councillor Hergert, no.
Councillor Townsend, state your name and how you're voting.
Councillor Townsend, in favor.
Okay, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. The motion does carry. Clerk Turner, just confirm the motion does carry.
Yes, the motion does carry 4-3.
Thank you. I am now looking for, on item 6, a motion to adjourn. So if all members of council can clear the screen. And then I'm just be looking for a check mark to move the adjournment and a check mark to second the adjournment. So I'm looking at Councillor Townsend. Are you moving the adjournment?
Councillor Townsend moves that adjournment.
Councillor Hergert, are you seconding the adjournment?
Councillor Hergert, second.
Thank you. Any questions, comments on this motion, members of council? On the motion to adjourn, please indicate by a check mark for yes and an X for no. I will start. I'm in favor of the motion. Councillor Hutchinson, state your name and your vote.
Councillor Hutchison, in favor.
Councillor Hamilton, your name and your vote.
Councillor Hamilton, in favor.
Deputy Mayor, your name and your vote.
Deputy Mayor Hutchinson, in favor.
Councillor Shea, state your name and your vote.
Councillor Shea, in favor.
Councillor Hergert, state your name and your vote.
Councillor Hergert, yes.
Councillor Townsend, state your name and your vote.
Councillor Townsend, in favor.
That motion carries unanimously. We stand adjourned. Thank you very much.